911, what's your emergency?
Boo.
Ah!
I think edited together, that'll be okay. Just that one take.
I think that'll be good. That'll be good. One take wonder. Yes.
One take wonder. Welcome back to the first Respodcast, everybody. Although it is February right now in real life, today's episode is a bit of a spooky, scary Halloween episode.
Yes. A spooky, scary Halloween episode. We are doing a Halloween in February. This is our Hallmark Christmas in July moment.
Yes, I was also going to bring up Christmas in July. It's just like that.
So everyone get ready. It is still cold out. So I guess it's thematic in that sense. Maybe you can imagine yourself on a cold, desolate mountaintop and you see like the wistful figure of like a ghostly woman beckoning you into the snow or something like that.
And that woman is Jennifer Love Hewitt.
The ghost whisperer herself.
Ooh, great tie-in to Ghost Whisperer. Or you could like imagine that you're in Nosferatu's castle or something.
Yes.
And then the 118 shows up for some reason.
Well, like you're Lily Rose Depp just going through all 5 stages of grief. Count Orlok is right there. And then they're just like, hey, I'm Buck.
We got a call about a guy getting attacked by a big sexy vampire.
That was the other guy from the 1920s. You're about 100 years late.
Oops.
And for our listeners at home, this is also a very special episode of the First Respodcast. You might even say it's one we've been waiting for, because who has introduced this episode but none other than the diva herself, Jane's wife, Shannon Diaz.
I feel like we're really forming a podcast telepathic connection at this point, because I was literally going to say my wife, Shannon Diaz. And that's not like a thing we've established before, I don't think.
No, it's not. It's just true.
So that's beautiful.
Our
and
minds.
I do have to admit, you guys, I've done some thinking about it over the last few months, and I do think, to be fair, part of the reason I'm so obsessed with Shannon Diaz is probably because I have a little crush on her and the actress who plays her. I find her very pretty and compelling and beautiful. But like,
and she's
I don't
funny,
think that makes...
and she's so talented, and just no one gets her.
She's from Minneapolis, that actress. So you know, I could know her.
Okay, Twin Cities. Okay, Twin Cities. That's your Twin City.
We should see
diva right there.
We should see if she has an Instagram and try and invite her on the podcast.
Yes, but I think that would be really cool. Diva, we're like your character's biggest fans, so just come on our show.
We literally are. We know you've gotten some hate from fans over the years. That is not us. We would never allow for that.
Never ever. This is a Shannon Diaz safe space. If you couldn't tell,
more than a safe space. It's the Shannon Diaz support group, you could argue.
The Shannon Diaz support group. That's the title of this episode. That's the title.
That's the title. Another funny thing about this episode of the podcast is that I've had a long week of working at the deli, so we didn't have a chance to record until today, which is Friday. So for the first time ever, we are recording on the same day as we are posting our last episode. So
thank you for all the love on that episode. We were in a very silly mood in that one. There will be far fewer fights about fudge in this episode.
Well, so far, as far as we know.
There's time.
Yeah, last week we were both feeling like we were kind of in a funk while recording, which actually I edited it and I think it turned out to be a really funny episode, which is crazy because that's not how I felt when we were recording it. But today we have a limited time, so we're trying to make it snappy because Ryan has to go to work.
I have to go to work.
I guess we'll see how that manifests, like mood-wise, in this episode. But I'm trying to like keep my spirits a little higher, no pun intended, than our last recording session.
No, fully. Like I was fully on like a date last night, and so that cut into like my morning now. So like I'm just like I got home and I sat down in bed and I watched the episode and I took my notes, and now we're recording the podcast, and then I have to leave immediately.
God. Yeah, I was up till like 1 a.m. last night editing today's episode because...
Who up editing a podcast?
Yeah, Ryan has this experience a lot, but because I didn't have a second job until recently, I have not had a lot of that experience. And last night, I lived it. I've been working all week. I haven't had a lot of time.
I did that on Thanksgiving.
Anyway.
I did that on Thanksgiving Day.
That's so funny. I can't believe we could have just not posted that week, but we did.
Hey, you know, it gave me a really good excuse to get some Black Friday sales. So
Really?
yeah, because I was already up.
Nice.
Anyways,
Well,
so starting
just
off
jumping right
the
into
episode, we open on a Buck monologue. When was the last time we opened on a Buck monologue?
Voiceover. Yeah,
Buck voiceover.
Very emo Buck voiceover. This is so funny. He's talking about, he's like, eventually everything dies. Like he's a
Right.
middle schooler writing in his diary.
Yeah, he's like, he discovered Evanescence in Linkin Park, and he's like, I just have so many emotions. And it's like,
Well,
it
as
intercut
he's saying
with this
this-
lady. Yeah, she's like leaving
Yeah.
flowers at her parents' grave, and she's talking about like, I'm finally gonna sell the house. I know how much you loved this house, but it's time. And as she's speaking, just like a full like George A. Romero Night of the Living Dead moment, this guy who seems to be, you know, reborn of the earth stumbles over to her, and she calls 911 going, ah!
Yeah, it's a great start to our first Halloween episode because it's just calls 911, just screams into the phone.
It was haunting. It was haunting, honestly.
It was haunting. It was camp. It was awesome.
And
So
so
the 118
yeah.
rolls up. It's nighttime, which I thought was cool because I feel like we haven't seen a lot of like nighttime 911 calls.
Yeah.
And it definitely brings a certain atmosphere to it.
A
It turns
spooky
out
atmosphere.
this isn't just a real zombie attacking this woman. It turns out like I think some grave diggers or not grave, whatever cemetery workers are called in modern times.
Are they
I
not
feel
called
like
grave diggers? Oh, are they not
I
called
mean,
grave
I don't know.
diggers?
They-
I thought they were.
For some reason, I said that. For some reason, I said that, and that felt very antiquated. But maybe it's not. But
Maybe
these
it's just
guys were like working
maybe
in the
that's
graveyard.
maybe that's like a really gauche term. Do any of our listeners work in a graveyard? Maybe that's just like a really
Yeah.
gauche term, or like even just like
Maybe
one of
we
those
have-
dated terms like stewardess that's like offensive now because of the
Right.
connotations.
Like, we don't call them that anymore. Excuse you. Well, apparently these men of the cemetery were people of cemetery
Yeah.
were working at the graveyard at night,
Yeah.
and a sinkhole opened up, which Chimney explains that ever since the earthquake callback, it's been like walking on eggshells and bubble wrap, like all these kind of air pockets and sinkholes have opened up because of the disturbance in the earth. And I have to say, this might be a weird reference, but the zombie guy, the guy who stumbled up to the woman, he was giving John Turturro in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou to me. He kind of looks like him. He's just like a tall, skinny guy with a shaved head and kind of a crazy look in his eye. And I was just watching that movie. So I was like, hey, looks like that guy.
That is a wonderful reference. That is not what I expected you to say. Wow.
I've been watching a lot of Coen brothers lately.
I was a little disappointed in the scene. I know I'm always demanding with these needle drops, but like I would have really loved a. I've been listening to a lot of Gaga recently because Abracadabra's out and we've been streaming that. Speaking of getting spooky, stream Abracadabra. We are getting it to #1. I was really hoping for like in the A Star Is Born soundtrack, that song, "You've been out all night digging my grave."
Is that on the Stars Born soundtrack?
Yeah, it's a duet with Bradley Cooper. Oh, it's so good. It's like a country rock
I
song.
only know like the two famous songs from that movie because I only saw it once and hated it, but not because of Lady Gaga. She was very good in it.
I feel like that's
It's just
what
one of those toxic pieces of media that comes from the brain of Bradley Cooper.
he wants that Oscar so bad, and they just keep giving him
He
Grammys
wants it?
instead.
Yeah. It's like, dude, just take the hint, pivot, get a music career.
He has a great
not
singing
gonna
voice.
happen.
He has a great singing voice, I will say.
Yeah, pretty good.
But
I hate him so much.
That's so fair. Although I will say I will always have mad respect for Bradley Cooper for being the bottom in Wet Hot American Summer.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's his best role.
That is his best role. That is his best role by far. I can't think of any other roles other than A Star Is Born and Rocket Raccoon.
I watched a crazy movie starring him this year because I got into this habit of just finding weird mid-2000s horror movies on Tubi to watch. I used to do this with more like 1980s horror movies, but lately I've been into like the mid-2000s kind of corny aesthetic.
Good
and
era.
There's a movie, there's a movie called The Midnight Meat Train, which is an adaptation of a Clive Barker short story. It's a horror movie starring Bradley Cooper about like this murderer who's killing people on the New York subway. And Bradley Cooper gets involved.
Midnight Meat Train. Do I even have to make the joke?
I know. I was thinking it. Like, if you didn't know that was a horror movie, you would maybe think it was a different kind of movie.
Yeah, keeping that gay career alive. Good job, Bradley.
But speaking of midnight meat trains, Buck and Eddie are on this call.
Yeah, they sure are.
No, just kidding. They are, but this isn't like a buddy scene. I just wanted to make that transition.
That was a great one.
The 118.
We'll hang on to that one.
The 118 has arrived to the cemetery, and you know they apparently there are still a few not great men of the cemetery who are still. There's like one guy who's still trapped underneath the dirt. So they like use one of those kind of infrared, like looking for him under the ground readers. I don't know what that's called. Like the thermal cameras or something like that. Yes, that's the term. They're not sure what to do. So Hen suddenly just jumps in the crane that's sitting there. You know,
she's on the excavator and she is just like, let's. It reminded me of like that Billy Eichner scene. I was just thinking like, let's go lesbians, let's go lesbians.
Literally, like apparently our girl Hen is like forklift certified. As you know, I could have predicted that. And she just jumps in the excavator. She knows how to drive that thing, and she just gets the guy out. And I love they cut back to the rest of the 118, and all of them are looking kind of like shocked and confused, except for Chimney, who's just got this proud smile on his face. And I thought that was a great choice.
That's his best friend, and he knew.
Exactly.
He knew that she could handle that. That's awesome. No, it was such a funny moment too, because like if there's one character who can whip out like a forklift license to operate heavy machinery, it's definitely going to be Hen. Okay, that's just like some shit she'd have in her back pocket.
Obviously, yeah.
I was thinking during this scene, you know, with these guys, they're stuck in this sinkhole and like they're like trying to rise out of the earth and all that, and I was just like, I don't know why I was just getting like Kill Bill, like just like a flash of that in my head, and I was just thinking Uma Thurman would not have this problem. Right.
I mean, you can't expect every person to be like Uma Thurman.
No, you can't, especially men. Let's be honest about that. But they get him out. They get the guy out. And he's okay. He was in an air pocket with a casket.
I guess you could say he's kind of a girl who got stuck.
He got a little stuck. He was kind of trapped under that dirt, okay?
He was kind of trapped, but you know what? They got him out.
They got him out, and he's trapped no more. But as they're walking away from the scene, because they get him out and all that, Hen's talking with Buck. They're walking, and Hen's just like, I hope they're not angry. Buck's like, what do you mean? Hen's like, the spirits of the graves that we disturbed. They like desecrated this grave site, and now Hen's like getting paranoid about, oh my god, what if they come back to haunt us?
Right. And I love, you know, they kind of focus in on Buck after, and because he's who he is, you can see him just fully taking that seriously and being like, wait, what?
And so, yeah, it's just like such a funny little moment. Do you think she was messing with him?
That's a good question. On the one hand, yes. On the other hand, she seems like she maybe believes in that stuff a little bit. I feel like there are later episodes that deal with superstition and she like buys into it.
Yeah, so. I would say so. It definitely seems like Buck's taking it a bit more seriously than she is, though.
Yeah. Buck definitely believes in that stuff.
Yeah.
But then we cut to Hen arriving at a hospital.
Yes.
And
title
Karen's
card
there.
And then,
Yeah. Title card and then Hen arriving at a hospital where Karen has called her. Apparently, Hen's estranged father has shown up at the hospital in critical condition. He's probably brain dead. It's one of those situations where he's, you know, hooked up to the ventilator. He's had, I think, a brain bleed, they say.
Yeah.
And it's not looking like he's going to wake up. And so they've contacted his next of kin, which was Hen. And they basically just want to know if she wants to pull the plug or not.
Yeah.
And this is difficult for Hen because This is something we like learn for the first time in this episode, I'm pretty sure. But apparently her dad left when she was very little, so she's really never known him.
Yeah, she was like 9, I think she says, I want to say.
Yeah.
Like she hadn't seen him
so
since...
this has put her in a really weird position where she has to make this huge decision about his life without really even knowing what he would want or even like what their relationship is to each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I gotta say at the top, like, yeah, I kind of appreciate that, like, it didn't do the sort of like the tired TV storyline of like what are the ethics of pulling the plug on someone who's, you know, like terminal and, you know, brain dead and all that stuff. Like, I'm glad we didn't really waste our time with like the ethical considerations and whatnot, because it's like this is more about character stuff. We don't have to have like a sort of a Terry Schiavo conversation about this man that she hasn't met. It's more about her own personal journey with it.
Yeah, it's really like not even about that at all.
Yeah, so I appreciated the pivot away from that, because I feel like that was really common, especially in like the 2010s, to have like those episodes. Like I feel like they had that on like New Amsterdam and like all like the hospital shows. I'm sure there was like a Grey's episode about it.
Yeah, probably multiple.
And it was a really interesting like thing to think about with Hen. It's like she doesn't know this man, you know, like she, you know, I mean, he had her name and address in his wallet, and like it's like, how long has he been in town? He hasn't reached out and all that, and so she's put into this very strange position where, you know, she presumably has, we get more into her emotional feelings about it later on in the episode, but it's just like, imagine being in that position where someone who was supposed to be very close to you but abandoned you, you haven't seen them in, I don't know, 30 years, and suddenly they're back in your life in a really big way like this, and you're like, do I have to kill them? Do I have to pull the plug? Do I have to do, I don't know. It
feels like it like shouldn't even be her responsibility, kind of.
I'm wondering where the rest of this guy's family is in this.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of just make it sound like he doesn't have any, I guess.
Yeah.
But the first hint we get of like who he is that Karen says the reason the hospital called them is that apparently the dad had Hen's name and her and Karen's address in his wallet. So like presumably he has been keeping tabs, which we'll hear a little more about later.
Yeah. And I gotta say, good to have Hen and Karen doing something other than, you know, watching their marriage collapse.
True. Very true.
Very lovely.
But we cut to one of my favorite things to the beginning of one of my favorite things to ever happen on this show.
Yeah.
Which is Maddie gets a 911 call at work. It's a guy who has fallen on some cliffs, and you know he's saying, "Oh, my leg's broken. I'm at this location." Maddie's having Maddie's
that was
having
a very
trouble hearing him.
that was a very whiny way for that guy to do it. Hey,
Come on.
My leg's broken. I need some help.
What are you talking about? Well, she is having trouble hearing him, as she often does on her 911 calls.
Yeah.
I talked about this in my drinking game, and I feel like I tried looking for clips of it for my video, and I could only find one from this episode, but I feel like there are multiple instances of this where Maddie will get on the phone with somebody and immediately be like, "I'm sorry, sir, I'm having trouble hearing you."
Oh, yeah.
To the extent that it became a cliche to me.
Yeah.
But, you know,
that
this
feels
guy,
really familiar, you just saying that. So, yeah, you're probably right on the money with that.
This guy, he's kind of fading in and out. It's a little staticky. She's having trouble hearing him. She gets his location, but then there's like a big static screech and the call drops. So we cut to the 118 getting there. Hen and Chimney are in the truck kind of gossiping about this dad situation at first.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the earlier scene too, I feel like this season has really been starting to lean into this thing of Hen and Chimney being besties, which I feel like wasn't really explored in season 1. Like they were honestly, I'm not sure if they were even planning to have them be like best friends in season 1, but now they're very much establishing this season that that's a thing.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I really like that. I love their dynamic, so I'm, like, happy to see it, especially because, like, it gives more of, like, especially as they're pairing Buck and Eddie up more, and as they're going to be, like, having them be established in that best friendship, I sort of gives everyone sort of a purposeful dynamic within the broader group, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it was a wise choice.
Yeah. But,
and they get to the scene of this fall, and I thought this was really funny. They, like, get to the cliffs, and they find, as like a remnant of this guy who fell, they find his abandoned selfie stick.
Diva down. Diva down.
I just love that. It's like, in like a century ago, it would have been like, I'm finding his tracks. And now it's like, oh, a trace of him, his selfie stick.
It's like where you'd expect like a cane or like a knocked over wheelchair, or even just like like a little memento, like a locket, or like a pocket watch of some variety. Now like the modern equivalent is like a selfie stick to take sweet pics for your Instagram. Or
a hiker has been here.
imagine like it's like 2022 or 23 and they find like a ring light like overturned.
Yeah.
They were making a TikTok and they got swept away.
We found his GoPro.
But they're sort of like looking down and sort of like, okay, so we think he fell around here. And so Eddie and Buck start to rappel down. You see some graffiti on the rocks, which is very interesting. It's one of those things of like, how did that graffiti get there?
Yeah.
It's one of those things you always think about, like on the side of like a train track that's overlooking a giant freeway overpass. It's like,
right, or big bridges.
Right. It's like, how did that graffiti? How did they do that? You know,
it's very impressive.
Yeah, but
Buck and Eddie get down there and Bobby's like, do you see anything? And Buck, I always think this is so funny. He's so corny. He says, just $1 million view. It's like, okay.
Right.
But then Eddie finds some human remains, skeletal remains. He finds a skeleton and he's like, I don't think this is the hiker we're looking for, but we've got skeletal remains down here. Bobby says, don't disturb them, but we'll call it in. Yeah. And then Eddie's like, I don't think this is our guy. Buck holds up a smartphone he's found next to the remains and goes, unless. Eddie says, you think a ghost called 911?
Can I just say, this smartphone looks quite modern by 2018 standards. Like it's kind of, it's on the larger side, I want to say.
I thought it could have been like a 2010, 2011 early iPhone, which I believe is the time period that they end up placing this in. So
maybe
I thought it was believable.
Okay,
it looked
maybe
like an old one to me.
Yeah, maybe it was like a 4G or something like that. Maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe I'll have to rewatch that scene because at first I was just thinking like, did they not have a phone from like the era they were trying to corner? I don't listen. Because to me it looked like this guy's got an iPhone 11. Okay.
It did not look like an 11 to me. It looked like a 4 or a 3 to me.
Okay. I'll have to rewatch it then just to confirm. But I will defer to you in that regard because I think I was taking notes and sort of half watching that shot. So
fair enough. Well, but then they, right as they say, you think a ghost called 911? Then they hear the actual alive hiker who's like groaning over somewhere else. They find him. I thought it was funny. He's got this huge like compound fracture special effect on his leg, and then he goes, my leg is broken. I was like, okay, Captain Obvious. Like, yeah,
we know, girl. Yeah, like
we get it. Like
his leg
that person who's desperate for attention.
Jesus Christ. It's like, we got eyes, don't we? His leg is fucked up, in fairness, but
it's pretty fucked up.
How stupid does he think Buck is? Like, I get it, but like, come on.
Well, it's just there's like a foot-long piece of bone sticking out of his leg is what I'm saying. It's like, I guessed that your leg was broken.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine? Like, they don't even see it, the leg, and they try to like stand him up or whatever, and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing? I have my bone sticking out of my leg. Weren't you supposed to be in the army?"
Well, then they start saying like, "You're lucky we found you. You were only on 911 for a little bit." And he's like, "What? My phone fell over when I went over. I didn't call 911." And then, significant look between Buck and Eddie. You know what that means? A ghost called 911.
Many such cases. Yes.
Many such cases.
And we go from there, because it kind of leaves it on that ominous note, to there's a Grant household pumpkin carving sesh Bobby, Athena,
So
and the
fun.
Grant kids. So fun. They're decorating them with paint. Did you paint your pumpkins growing up, or did you just carve them?
No, we just carved them.
Yeah, same. We didn't ever break out the paint. They are decorating a bunch of them with ghosts, and Athena asks, and Bobby says, "Oh, they're for Buck. We're bringing them down to the station."
And Bobby says he thinks a ghost called 911. Drink for the line, a ghost called 911.
Drink for the line. Getting my Diet Coke. I have it right here.
Ryan doesn't drink water. He just drinks Diet Coke.
We call it gay water where I'm from. Thank you.
Oh, of course.
But
Well,
yes.
There's a little more talking about ghosts, and eventually, when May and Harry end up leaving, Athena says to Bobby, "A ghost called 911, huh?" So drink again.
Drink again.
And Bobby starts to tell her about the situation, and of course Athena's like policewoman interests are piqued. Because she starts thinking like, whoa, what location? Like, what did you say? Like, that's interesting. Human remains. I'm going to find out who that was.
Yep.
And I wanted to call attention to something Bobby says, which is, Bobby refers to the human remains as a he. And Athena's like, he? And Bobby says, based on the ring size, Eddie figured he must have been male.
Right.
And I was like, okay, Detective Eddie. And then I wrote down, why are you, as a man, so concerned about men's wedding band sizes?
Oh my God.
To propose to your gay lover or something?
Oh my God. Which could mean nothing.
I'm just saying.
Which could mean nothing. You know. This is why Brooklyn thought we were crazy, by the way.
Yes. Come on, I'm being facetious.
We're being facetious. We're being ironic. I love the little moment. I love the little moment in this scene at the end where she's got her hunch and she's gonna go do some detective work, and Bobby asks, "You're not gonna clean up?" And Angela, she just like hand waves it away. The hand acting was great. Is so good in this scene. But yeah, speaking of Eddie.
Speaking of Eddie, we cut to Eddie and Carla are getting a tour of this like fancy new agey kind of school that they're thinking about enrolling Chris in.
Yep.
It's not super clear if it's like exclusively a school for special needs kids or if it's just kind of a one of those kind of extra attention kinds of schools.
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter. It's probably like a charter school or something like that. One of those ones with like a private curriculum and like the small class size, like one that's like, but they still get state funding and everything, so tuition is lower than like a traditional private school. I don't know. Charter schools are like a whole thing. I don't want to get into it, but
yeah. Well, they're showing them around, and it seems like very cool. They've got all these nice programs. They've got, like you said, a small class size. Eddie sees some kids and they all seem really happy, so he's kind of thinking this would be a good option. Yeah. And then as he's talking to the woman giving them the tour, she says this thing where she's like, of course, now all we need to do is the family meeting. Yeah. We need to meet Mrs. Diaz. And Eddie's like, oh no, my wife is estranged. I have to say, this has always pissed me off because like, you're with me, right? Like, what kind of school would have it be especially a school for children with special needs, would have it be a requirement to have like two perfect nuclear family heterosexual parents? That seems so weird.
In California, too.
In California, yeah, to see this dad touring the school alone with his like nanny, essentially, and assume that he must have a wife who's also in the picture. Like, I just feel like, especially at a school where you are paying more attention to like kids with unique circumstances, you would probably like have a whole policy about like, we're inclusive and we like, make sure not to assume that anyone has a traditional family situation. Eddie could have a husband, just saying, or he could just be a single dad. And like, it seems really weird that they think that this is like that he can't just say, I'm a single dad. Yeah.
Also, just gonna say, racism ding. Well, if they're going to assume there's a Mrs. Diaz in the picture, why wouldn't they just assume that it's Carla? Like he sees they see Eddie like touring with Carla at Christopher's school. Why wouldn't they just assume that it's Carla? That's his wife.
I mean, maybe they introduced, like when they met, maybe they introduced Carla as like,
that would make more sense,
caretaker or whatever. But we don't know.
I mean, yeah,
It seems like the school is
yeah.
making a lot of assumptions right off the bat.
Yeah,
It's just crazy to me that any educator would see this guy and go, so where's Mrs. Diaz? Like, I feel like it's just good practice to be like, oh, and is there a mom in the picture or something? Like,
yeah, a little discretion,
I feel like
a little
that's just not something
tact.
you assume.
You know,
Yeah.
or like, is it a requirement that all kids enrolled in this school come from healthy, stable, loving 2-parent homes? Like, I don't think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I'm always so weirded out by this because, like I said, especially if it's a school for kids who need a little more attention or like need specific things, I'm like, I feel like you should be even more inclusive of like kids who have a non-traditional background or like, I don't know, sometimes you hear stories about like bad parents who like don't want to deal with kids with disabilities, and you might end up with a kid with a single parent. I'm just like, come on, this is it's so contrived, I guess is what I'm saying. I get that they needed an excuse to bring Shannon back into the show, but I feel like they could have done it more tactfully than this.
No, I agree.
This was just like, no school on earth would have this as a requirement.
They just needed like a shorthand explanation to get Shannon back in the picture, and like from that we get the bombshell revelation that they don't actually have a custody agreement because they're still married, which is probably why they saw it on their forms that he's still married. There's no custody agreement, so we'll just assume there's a Mrs. Diaz, and she's still in the picture.
Yeah.
I don't know. She could be dead.
Well,
right?
yes,
What if he's a widower? Like, I don't know. Like,
well,
what
I made
then?
a note of this too. Of like, oh, he seems to think that the issue is not having a custody agreement, but I still don't think that would be a problem. I feel like you just tell the school the mom's not in the picture. Like, sometimes spouses just leave and you don't get a divorce or whatever. Like, that's not unheard of.
Yeah. And I mean, such as is the case here, you know, so
speaking
it's
of
a very
couples
frustrating
in sticky
setup.
Situations.
Yes, couples in sticky situations.
We cut to a couple at a haunted house where suddenly a swarm of bats starts attacking everybody.
Did you get the needle drop in this scene? As they're walking through the haunted house, the Psycho score is playing.
Oh.
The score from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is playing.
I did catch one later on that I'll mention.
But real bats invade the pumpkin patch. And so, of course, the 118 rolls up because there's like a stampede or whatnot. There's like trampling injuries and they're worried about rabies.
According to like the haunted house, like whatever owner or whoever they're talking to, he seems to think that nobody has been bitten by bats and most of the injuries were in the stampede. I feel like they should check.
Yeah.
Like,
double check.
In fact, bat bites are notoriously like hard to notice sometimes. Like, that's why you have to be careful. Like, if you wake up with a bat in your room or something, you have to check all over your body to make sure you didn't get bitten because of rabies.
Yeah.
So I just hope everybody involved in this situation like went to the doctor and got a rabies shot.
Did you ever watch Scrubs?
You've already brought this up to me because I talked about my fear of rabies
during
the
right. Okay.
Second episode.
Yeah, okay.
About how there's that episode of Scrubs.
I forgot. Yeah, I just anytime I see rabies in fiction now, I just think of that one episode of Scrubs because it was the craziest out of left field thing that could have happened.
Yeah, I don't remember that specific thing happening, but I did used to watch a lot of Scrubs as a kid.
How many people get rabies nowadays? I don't. You don't really hear about rabies. That's one thing. Actually, that's one thing from like To Kill a Mockingbird and like Cujo that like I thought was gonna be a bigger deal when I was older. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm gonna have to look on the lookout for rabies. True. I haven't even seen a bat since I was a kid. When was the last time you saw a bat?
Okay, well, that is not living in an old house privilege. First of all, I see bats all the time.
Oh.
But it's like I said, it's like bat bites are not uncommon. I think the reason you don't hear about it though is just, for one thing, it's still not very common to get rabies, even though it's a really terrible disease. It's not very common. And I think when people do, because it's so horrible, I think the advice is if you even think there's a chance you've been exposed to rabies, you go and get a rabies shot. So I assume that as like a public health directive has been very effective.
Okay.
But people still do get rabies, especially in like certain parts of the world, I guess, where you have more risk for that. What
was that? Did you ever see that Tumblr thing? I may have mentioned this too. Did you ever see that like Tumblr thing of like the rabies pride? It was like shit posting, like the little rabid boy that wants to become fully rabid and is like being discriminated against because he wants to have rabies.
It's like, listen, you can get rabies and treat yourself as a marginalized group if you want, but that won't last very long because then you'll just die of the rabies.
That's
true. Everybody get your rabies shots if you think you've been exposed.
But in the meantime, rabies pride. you know?
In the meantime, rabies pride. As long as you get those shots, I won't judge you for like making a rabies pride flag.
But Chimney
But
seems
I would
to
advise
disagree.
you to get the shots.
Chimney seems to
Yes.
disagree. He is bigoted against all bats. He doesn't like rats with wings. And
Yeah, that part I didn't like because, like, although I wouldn't want a bat flying around my house, which again has happened to me numerous times, I do think they're nice animals and they're cute and they eat bugs and stuff, so they're good for. They even say in this episode, they say, "Oh, there are so many bats because like it's the middle of a mosquito." It's mosquito season. Or whatever.
It's like she uses the term mosquito epidemic. Was there like an influx of mosquitoes in LA or something? I don't know what was happening on the West Coast in that time.
Maybe it's also post-earthquake. Like the earthquake unleashed all the mosquitoes.
What, like a hellmouth opening up? Actually, I can see that. Never mind. So basically, this couple that's in a sticky situation. This guy ran into the wall. This is such a nothing call if you think about it.
It lasts like 30 seconds.
He basically ran into the wall. They're checking him for head injuries, and they're right next to a guillotine. Interesting. And they ask him, like, do you know your name? He's like, it's so and so. Do you know who the president is? And he's like, do I have to say it?
I feel like I remember a Grey's Anatomy episode doing this same kind of thing during the Trump era, where like there's a reference to who the president is, and they just like allude to it, like, do I have to? Or like, come on. And it's like, I guess these shows didn't really want to touch explicitly like their thoughts on Trump, but it was clearly like, it's interesting that there's never any explicit reference to any of that stuff, but like sometimes you get a little ridiculous times we live in or whatever.
It definitely hits differently now that we're in the second worst Trump presidency. It's like, man, we didn't even know how not as bad as we have it now. We had it back then.
Yeah.
But we go from that to a, what would you call this? Mathena? Maddie and Athena? Is that their ship name? Mathena?
Yeah, Mathena scene.
Yeah, Mathena moment.
Athena has arrived at the dispatch center because she wants to get to the bottom of this dead hiker case. And so she wants to review the call that she thinks might have been associated with him. So Terry moment.
Yeah, everyone say, hi, Terry. Hi, Terry.
Hi, Terry. Sadly, Josh isn't around to fall in love with him,
I know,
as we would like to happen. But Terry, our IT guy, is doing his little thing where he's good with technology. And he, Athena has figured out kind of a timeline based on like when this guy's phone number was changed, stuff like that. They think it was about 6 years back, and Terry finds the call, and it's the same call Maddie got the other day.
Call. Ooh.
So she's like, wait, this sounds like my call. Play back my call from the other day. And it's just static.
There was no voice on the other end. It was like, it was like really the poltergeist moment. It was like ridiculous.
A ghost called 911.
A ghost called 911. There's no other explanation. It was like literally like a blip in the space-time rift or something like that. Like it was.
And you know who agrees is Buck, because then we cut to Buck and Maddie pouring white wine. I was so excited. I was like, we are so back.
We are so
They're pouring white
back.
wine at dinner. It's so funny, truly, that almost every single time we cut to them having dinner together, they are cracking open a bottle of white wine. Like if I were the actors, it must be so funny to be like, oh, we're opening the white wine again.
Do you think Buck was a big white wine drinker before he started dating Abby, or was that something he picked up from her? I think
he definitely picked up that habit from her. And I mean, I feel like in shows like this and like Lifetime movies, the shorthand of what like women of a certain age like to drink is just white wine, and pretty much only white wine.
Yeah. And because of that, now Buck is like, he's going out to the bar. Yeah, I'll have a Moscato. Do you have any Pinot Grigio with you? They're like, Buck, get a beer.
It's funny how he like code switches alcohol wise depending on who he's hanging out with, because when he's with Maddie or Abby or a girl he's dating, he'll crack open the white wine. But when he's hanging out with Eddie, they only drink beer. because, guys only drink beer. And if they drank white wine together, it would be a little too gay and romantic and charged.
Oh my God, Buddy's first dinner. Do you think he's gonna oh, do you remember? No, because on Buck's first date with Tommy poured him a pitcher of beer.
Ugh, that's so unsexy. No offense to anyone who drinks beer on dates.
No, it's very unsexy. Like, I feel like whenever I I'm going out, like I want to get like a glass of wine, or like if I'm feeling like really cheeky, maybe a cocktail or something. But like if I get a beer, it's because I'm like at a dive bar and there's like a darts board and a pool table, and I'm going to
I could see
pace myself.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with drinking beer on dates. I do think a pitcher of beer is kind of weird. That is bowling alley fare.
No, that is bowling alley fare. That's like Peter's going to the clam with Quagmire and Joe. So
I feel like you'll know when Buddy becomes romantic because they'll start drinking white wine instead of beer.
Exactly. Maybe Eddie will have like an influence. Maybe like Eddie will reveal, I actually want a tequila soda or something.
Well, I've always been waiting for Buck's skills as a South American bartender to come back at some point. So maybe he'll start mixing drinks. Mm-hmm. That'd be fun.
He'll make like a mezcal cocktail with like grenadine and grapefruit juice and something like that. It'll be like really nice.
There is a line in like season 6 where Buck's on a date with Natalia and he's gotten a Vermentino, which I believe is a skin-on white wine. I know this because I was just shopping for orange wines, which are skin-on white wines.
Oh,
at the wine store.
We do a good orange wine at my restaurant. It's the Alsace wine.
Nice.
It's like a French orange wine.
The one I got last time was like, it's very sour, but like in a very pleasant way.
Yeah.
It just kind of has a more visceral.
They always have like
flavor.
a unique flavor palette,
Mm-hmm.
Like our orange wine is definitely our sweetest wine because we always specialize in dry wines because we're like a Mediterranean restaurant. And so like whenever they're like, I want a sweet wine, I say, get the orange wine. It's our only sweet wine.
Ooh, a sweet orange wine sounds so nice.
It's really nice. But I can only have it every now and again. Like otherwise it's just a bit too sweet for me. I honestly prefer a dry wine.
I kind of like a sweet wine. I used to think I preferred dry just because that was kind of like the most common kind. And I thought like, oh, of course. But I actually find now with white wines, I like one that's a little fruitier.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But okay, so Buck is over here as a big ghost believer. He's like pushing this narrative, and Maddie, I mean, like she's trying to be skeptical, but I mean, listen, this is Jennifer Love Hewitt. She's the fucking ghost whisperer. Okay, they knew what they were doing, giving her this call.
Yeah. Was this whole episode kind of a reference to Ghost Whisperer?
and in fairness, I loved Ghost Whisperer when it was on. I want to say 13, when I was like watching that show, 12 or 13, and like I loved that show. And so I was very happy to see some representation of that on our screens. I wonder if Jennifer still talks to anyone in the cast. I think she was like a big producer on the show in its like last few seasons. Mm-hmm. So that'd be funny.
Buck does say in this scene, he says again, we both know a ghost called 911. And then also there's a line where Maddie's talking about like the loved ones of this dead guy and how sad it must be. And she's talking about having someone officially declared dead. And she says, that is so awful. And I was like, awful people call back.
Awful people call back.
Then suddenly the conversation kind of takes a shift because it starts to hit a little too close to home with this whole talk of imagine not seeing someone for so long that you have to give up on ever seeing them again. And, they're sitting in Abby's house.
Yeah.
And Maddie starts to kind of gently nudge like, at a certain point, maybe it's time to give up.
It's like, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like they're clearly talking about something else when they're talking about the one thing, right? And so I think like Buck, like he's definitely come around, I think, to sort of the realization that this isn't really going to happen. He's like, he needs that last little push to really give up his romance with Abby for good. But I think he now is like seeing the writing on the wall, because we saw him struggling with it a few episodes ago, like talking with Bobby. It seems like it's all really sort of coming to a head now because Buck is just like clearly miserable. He's living in a spell of turmoil. Like he's saying, like, the I think he says to Carla later in the episode, the calls are getting shorter and like the gaps between calls are getting further. You know, it's just
It's rough.
and this is a situationship that you never want to fall into, kids. Don't do long distance. Don't do it. Don't do it.
But somewhere else, Hen and Karen have decided to go to Hen's dad's house.
And they're not fighting about anything. They're not fighting about anything.
Yay. I think they're looking for a will, essentially. They're trying to find out if they can find basically the guy's like directive, like what he would want in this situation. Because again, Hen doesn't really want to have this responsibility. And she ends up finding like a chest in this guy's house full of like clippings about Hen. Like, you know, there's an article that featured her a couple years ago and all this stuff about her life. So again, clearly he was actually keeping track of her, which kind of, you know, it doesn't make up for leaving her all her life, but it kind of shows Hen that like, oh, he did kind of care in some sense. He was still thinking about her all this time.
Yeah. She also finds some like personal artifacts of his, like some degrees. He finds some envelopes that are rubber banded together, which I believe are implied to be the envelopes that she wrote him or something. I don't know.
Right, because she mentions later writing a lot of letters to him.
But is that what that's implying, or were they just straight envelopes banded together? Like, or were they tax forms or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. You'd think they would put more emphasis on them if they were supposed to be those letters.
Yeah, I think really she was just kind of like looking through his stuff, and she found like some personal things to make him more of like a person in her brain. Because it's like, oh, this guy went to college, you know. But then it's a really short scene. We don't really find out a lot about it other than he's been in town longer than maybe she thought, and he's been keeping close tabs on her.
Yeah,
maybe he was going to reach out, and then this whole aneurysm or whatever happened, and cut that short. So we cut from that to a very exciting scene. Drum roll,
Shannon
please.
Is knocking on Eddie's door.
Tapping
The door
on the glass.
opens.
She's waving through the window.
Shut up. The door opens. And it's the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. It's Shannon Diaz.
Stunning.
I wrote in my notes,
radiantly beautiful.
I love her. She's beautiful. I love her. I need her. She comes in, they kind of awkwardly hug, and then she, you know, goes into Christopher's room. She's kind of looking at all his stuff. She has a crazy line where she mentions being surprised when she found out, like just a day ago, that Eddie had left Texas. And I'm like, she didn't know that he left Texas? He didn't even tell her?
If they haven't been in communication, I guess, but like he moved 30 minutes from where she lives.
This whole episode is I just have to say, the whole Shannon, Eddie, Christopher situation, I don't really get it, and I feel like the show kind of does a bad job of illustrating exactly what happened here, because there are a lot of parts of it that I feel like don't really fit together, and I feel like it kind of contributes to why a lot of the fandom is so hard on Shannon, is that I feel like the show just doesn't give you like the clarity that you need. We hear that Shannon's mom was sick, and Eddie didn't want to move with her to LA or like go on a trip with her even to go be with her mom during this time. We find out later, like her mom had cancer. It was a big deal. So Shannon left, but then the problem, Eddie says, is that she never came back. And it's not really clear like why or like what that meant, like if she was truly no contact or not. Because that's kind of how they make it seem. But I have to say, just from like a writing perspective, this isn't just me loving Shannon and like wanting her to be more complex. But I have to say, I feel like it just doesn't really make sense that like for what we see of her, I feel like it doesn't really read to me like that she would leave and just not contact them at all. And then it also seems like it's kind of a two-way street, because it's like, why wouldn't Eddie at least try to tell her that, like, did she block him or something? Like, why couldn't he, like, call her or send her a letter when he was moving from Texas? Like, I feel like, again, to the Shannon haters, like, that to me is a strike against Eddie, because what do you mean you're not telling your son's mother that you're moving multiple states over to the state where she lives?
Can I just say, like, everything we learn about their relationship in this conversation, from my perspective, as someone who loves Eddie, I love Eddie, but I gotta say, like, in this marriage, like, he was like, I guess, borderline sociopathic, to her. I mean,
No,
like,
I'm sorry. He was the problem, and I will maintain that forever.
he got her pregnant, okay, as teenagers, and then left her with the baby to go fight in a war in
like
Afghanistan.
as soon as the baby was born.
As soon as the baby was born. And then finally, when he was discharged and he came home, he won't even, go with her to take care of her cancer-stricken mother until she dies with their kid, leaving her alone to do all that herself. Jesus, I would have walked out too. I would have needed a break.
Yeah. Yeah. And then people try and say, like, well, Shannon, like, left her disabled son when she should. It's like, come on, Eddie left his disabled son. People talk about this as if he had to join the army, as if, like, there are no other jobs in the world, you know?
He could have been a firefighter in Texas. I don't know. He's pretty good at it in LA.
He could have worked in the fucking grocery store deli, but he didn't.
He could have
done anything.
I mean, like, it's just crazy to me how people will, like, will pounce on Shannon in this way. And, like, I feel like there is a double standard in general, in that it is. I was actually, we were talking about this because I was in school, and we were reading a play in which a sort of like a mother sort of abandons her family and comes back later, and like sort of socially, there is a greater taboo amongst absentee mothers than there is absentee fathers.
Very much.
And so I think like some of the venom that is directed towards Shannon, it could be attributed to that, in that like a deadbeat dad is a lot less surprising and is a lot easier to forgive in some ways, from I guess a cultural perspective, than the mom who walks out on her family and comes back years later.
It's funny that this episode kind of contains both.
Yeah.
We have Shannon, and then Hen is literally dealing with this situation of the father who abandoned her as a child, her learning that, I don't know. It's not that she like fully forgives him necessarily, but the episode does end on a pretty forgiving note.
It does.
And humanize him constantly.
A healing note, for sure.
Yeah. And I'm not saying the show had a double standard per se, because I think the show depicts Shannon rather sympathetically.
Oh, yeah.
Although I think they could have been more critical of Eddie's actions at some points. But, the show, it's the fandom who really come down hard on Shannon.
But Eddie's the lead sexy boy. He's the new sexy boy. We need him to be sexy and cool. He can't be that problematic.
This whole episode and like the entire construction of this story like doesn't make that much sense to me, because that's all I'll say. I mostly believe Shannon was in the right. I also think though that some of the writing is just like not the best in terms of like both being clear about what happened and even just like being in character. Like it's hard to reconcile Shannon going completely no contact and everything else we know about her and what we see of her. So I feel like that's kind of, people in fandom, they just take all this stuff at face value instead of being like, that's kind of inconsistent. And like, maybe I should think of that as a problem with the writing instead of a problem with Shannon, the person,
Yeah. I think like with Shannon, it really feels like to me, like this was just like a really toxic relationship and like a toxic marriage that was sort of doomed to fail from the start.
Yes.
I mean, like also due in no small part to Eddie's homosexuality. But
also they were children.
They were literal children. I mean, they weren't going to succeed at this marriage project, this kid project, whatever. No. Because, I mean, they had no foundation, and so when it collapsed, I mean, like, who's fucking surprised? So I don't think that makes either of them necessarily bad people. I think they were just way in over their heads, and it was just a really challenging situation. I wish the show would
acknowledge that more.
Yeah,
I wish the show would acknowledge that more, because I feel like it has not really come up. They almost always talk about this relationship as if it was this totally normal adult marriage, and it's like, no. I feel like it'd be much more interesting to acknowledge that you were two teenagers who got pregnant and got married out of obligation.
Yeah,
and of course it was doomed to fail, and like I feel like that's really the path Eddie needs to be on in terms of like forgiving and moving on from Shannon.
Yeah.
But for some reason, the show like won't touch that. So that's something I wish they would revisit.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
But they end up having kind of a fight here.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
They just, the scene, they have a fight. They sort of get to the heart of some of their issues. Eddie's being so obtuse in this scene. He's like, what did you need that I didn't give you? And Shannon's like, you, bitch. Like, I had a baby and you fucking left for another continent.
How about a partner in this life? How about a partner in this marriage, right?
There's an exchange right at the end where he says, I always had your back. And she says, no, you were in Afghanistan. And that's how the scene ends. And I don't know why, but that made me laugh so hard. Maybe it's just like the high drama of it.
Maybe it's because Eddie was introduced as this loving, doting father who was so, obsessed with his kid, but we never really think about him like as a deadbeat dad type. And I guess he never really was a deadbeat dad in the classic sense, but he was certainly an absentee father.
I don't think deadbeat is the right word, but I think he definitely is in a glass house for critiquing Shannon for leaving. If
Shannon's an absentee
been there
mom,
for much longer in Christopher's life than he has.
Yeah, if Shannon's an absentee mom, then Eddie was certainly an absentee dad for the first. Daddy was certainly an absentee dad for the first, few years of their marriage and for the first few years of Chris's life. It's just a fact. He was in the army. He was in Afghanistan.
Yeah. In my notes during this scene, I just kept like writing down quotes and then writing, Eddie, I'm gonna kill you. So I'm gonna, to be clear, again, I like Eddie, but like these are the times when like my distaste for the things he has done comes out.
I have never seen a fandom pounce on someone that I know in the way that Eddie fans have pounced on you.
You know what? I'm not over it because it still makes me so sad and angry every time it happens. But I know that our listeners understand like where I'm coming from and like they get it, and the girls that get it, and the girls who don't. And it's like, I've got to stop wasting my time arguing with people who are lacking basic media literacy skills. It's like, it's not my fault that you guys don't understand how critiquing a work of fiction works.
Yeah.
And that's all I'll say about that.
Nuances in 2025. Nuances in.
All right. Funny story. We decided to split this recording session into 2 sessions.
Yeah.
Because Ryan had to rush off to work, and we were realizing that we might not actually have enough time to cover the whole episode.
I was the problem child today, and I want to say on the record, I apologize. It's just that I have bills and I have a job.
That's not what I meant.
And my manager already wrote me up twice for being late in 1 week. So if I'm late again, I'll get suspended.
Damn. Was it because of the podcast?
Not even at all. It was because one of them was actually because the train was delayed, and one of them because I was on a date. And it was like the morning after, and I didn't want to leave. It's with the same guy. It's with the same guy.
You're living your like Sex and the City life.
I'm sorry.
Speaking of Cynthia Nixon, we were just off the mic. We were talking about Cynthia Nixon being a rude customer at Ryan's restaurant he works at.
She's kind of an asshole. Sorry, Cynthia. If you wanna hash it out, come on the pod.
Yeah, come on the pod. Well, it is now 11:22 p.m. where I am, and it's an hour later where Ryan is. So hopefully this won't be too chaotic. But yeah, we just decided after our like Shannon rant, we decided to put it on pause and come back. So here we are. And I think our next scene is Hen and Athena girls' night.
Girls' night with some red wine, but it's like a light. It's like a really light red. It's almost like a half between like a red and a rosé kind of.
Well, you know what I've said before about this? I talked about this in my Lifetime Wrong video, how at least in Lifetime movies, whenever they have red wine on screen, it's so obviously fake red wine because it always looks like Kool-Aid, It looks like cranberry juice. So my theory is that it's really hard to replicate the consistency of red wine in a fake red wine on screen, which is also my theory for why you see white wine more commonly on TV shows and movies, at least this one and Lifetime movies, because maybe you can just use like white grape juice or something and it looks more accurate. But
that's
so
probably
if
true.
the red wine looks weird in this scene, I would guess it's the same problem of it being hard to replicate on screen.
I'm just like thinking about like what would be a good substitute for red wine, because like cranberry juice wouldn't work. It's too light. But grape juice. What if you mixed grape and cranberry juice? Because grape juice, like a purple, like a red grape juice, that might give
feel like
some
you would
sort
think
of
that
desirable
just
effect.
grape juice would work, but maybe it like shows up a little too clear or something on screen.
Maybe they need the tannins.
Speaking of which, I'm having a little white wine in honor of Buck and Maddie.
Yes.
Now that it's nighttime.
Yes, I love that for you. At work, I got lit on red wine, and so I'm fully sober. But I was eating my little chopped salad, and I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have. Because like it was okay. So in order to hide the fact that we're drinking from our boss, like on the security cameras, we'll pour.
Wait, you drink in secret on the job?
Oh, of course we do. And we'll pour the booze into like these little like ceramic mugs, so it looks like coffee. We'll do it off camera.
Okay, that's kind of crazy.
We have little blind spots in the security cameras, and we'll pour it into like the little mugs and everything, and it'll just look like we're drinking coffee. And I didn't realize how much of the bottle was left, and so I I took the bottle of the Cabernet, and I was like, well, fill her up. To my 63-year-old boss, I hope you're not listening to this pod, but
yeah, geez. We do have your full name on this thing.
I plead the fifth. I've never had a drop in my life. I'm a Mormon.
Yeah, I've never drunk anything, actually. Not even water.
I have a wife.
I'm happily married.
Happily married,
well.
living sinlessly. Yes. But
anyway, sorry, this is already off to a chaotic start.
It's a chaotic
just watched
episode.
the new episode of Severance.
Oh my God.
Where are my Severance and 911 watchers at?
What is that show about? What is it about?
It's about work.
Is it just Adam Scott like going insane in like this Lynchian nightmare?
That's like part of it. It's actually very funny. That was something that surprised me about watching it. It's like kind of a black comedy.
Okay. Like Always Sunny or...
It's kind of its own thing. I told you it's hard to describe. But I told you already there's Old Man Yowie. And that didn't even convince you to watch it.
No, that has been the biggest selling point. Okay, Jane has been trying to sell me on this show for weeks now. And the thing that has been the biggest selling point that I'm like, I would totally tune in is Old Man Yowie with Christopher Walken.
I'm telling you, John Turturro. Wow, this is my second John Turturro mention of the episode.
John, come on the
I'm
pod.
going through a phase. John, come on. He's what, like 67? He probably watches 911.
Oh, yeah, he'd probably
Isn't that the whole
to the
thing
first
that only
podcast.
old people are watching network TV?
Right. So what do you think are his like mad buddy takes?
Maybe maybe he watches more for like Angela Bassett, that kind of thing. Because that's like his peer.
Imagine because what's that thing like 60-year-olds, older people say that they're like, that's a handsome woman.
Do they say that?
Probably. I think I've heard that. I could be wrong.
I'm going to be so embarrassed if my mom ever listens to this episode because she's in her 60s and this is probably insulting.
Oh, well, my dad's about to turn 60. I asked him.
My parents had me late.
I asked my dad how he was feeling about turning 60. He goes, well, not great if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, my dad, when he turned... I don't know, one of his last birthdays or maybe when he retired, he said, it's like when I had kids, when I got married, when I, whatever, it kind of just makes me feel like I'm one step closer to death. I was like, oh, okay.
I mean, that is something that people I feel like in that bracket start to like really think about. My dad, after Trump got elected for the second time, he said to me, I was texting him like, hey, so Dad, how's it going? And he goes, well, welcome to your nightmare. You guys have to sort it out. I'll be either dead or in a wheelchair by the time this whole thing blows over. I'm like, great, Dad.
No, my dad says stuff like that too. He's like, my generation failed. I'm like, okay, whose fault is that?
Right. It's like, okay, these are wonderful words of comfort, but do you have anything else to offer in this moment? It's like, no.
Literally.
Great. I guess it's up to us.
All right. We're getting a little sidetracked, but one more thing I will say. I've had an idea which is, we've talked about wanting to start a Patreon for this show before. Yes. For the record, listeners, we do want to do that just because, like I've said before, I think we ended up expending a little more time and effort on this show than we planned. Not that we didn't plan to expend any time and effort, but like we really do edit these episodes pretty intensely and like we spend like several hours a week on it. So we've thought about starting a Patreon to kind of like get compensated for our time on some level. And we just like haven't gotten around to it yet. But I have one idea for the Patreon, which is I force you to watch Severance.
Oh my God.
We talk about it.
And we talk about it.
Then at least you would have like a financial incentive to watch it then,
this is such a moment of like getting your friends into your like hyperfixation. This is so
literally. And it's like a chain letter or something because my friend sat me down and forced me to watch it a few weeks ago, and that's how I got into it.
I would totally do that. I think that'd be a really fun like Patreon bonus episode because like I like had the idea for a Patreon that we would do like season like every season we'd do like a collection of the rambles that we cut out of the seasons and like do like a compilation there. So we'd start with like the season 1 rambles, which we're sitting on right now, and I haven't edited together. I've been meaning to for like weeks.
Yeah, you've been saying you will for like months.
I know,
but I'm thinking on the Patreon we could talk about the Step Up movies. Like, obviously we have to do that. We could watch Gem and the Holograms starring Ryan Guzman.
We could do a tour of like the Oliver Stark like deep filmography from before 911.
All the like British shows he's been on.
We could do like some like classic Angela Bassett core like Waiting to Exhale.
I was thinking that too. I saw I think on Tubi or something right now they've got What's Love Got to Do with It, which I've been meaning to watch for a while.
That movie's so fucking good. That movie's so good. So I feel like we have like a lot of ideas that we could do, and they'd all be like vaguely 911 themed because they'd like like be coalesced around that sort of idea. Yeah.
Other than the Severance thing, they wouldn't all be strictly 911 themed. We could do polls and stuff.
Okay, well, but the thing about the Severance thing is it's also themed around us because we're the hosts. So if we're doing a Severance episode, we also have to do a Glee episode.
Oh yeah, we could do a Glee episode. I that was an idea I had too. Is like other Ryan Murphy shows. We could talk about other Ryan Murphy shows.
Oh yeah, we could honestly just do like an hour long like talk about like our Teen Wolf takes.
True. I had a really Teen Wolf because we've separately talked about Teen Wolf, but we haven't talked about it together.
I had a really rancid thought on the subway. It was like one of those really horrible, intrusive thoughts that like you have to sit up and like shake out of your brain because it's so awful to think about. I was sitting on the subway listening to my music. I was listening to Abracadabra, and I was thinking to myself, I should rewatch Teen Wolf.
Ooh, no. Let me just rewatch your own video and then rewatch my videos.
Okay,
instead.
Because like I know I would watch that show and I'd be like, man, someone should make a video about this.
That's the nice thing about making a video about a TV show is you kind of get to exhaust all of your thoughts about it, you know? And
you
then
never have
like,
to talk about it again.
I don't have to talk or think about this anymore, which obviously I've sort of broken that for 911 because now we do this podcast. But, you know, like Teen Wolf, I really feel like I've exhausted that. I'm like, I don't have to ever think about that again.
Yeah, like I made like, okay, after my follow-up video to Teen Wolf was like an unscripted ranking of every Degrassi character, right? And like since I made that video, I don't think I've thought about Degrassi in any meaningful way once.
Right? And this is why it's so tragic that people are always asking me to do more Degrassi content, because I'm like, you know, I kind of got it out of my system way back in 2021. I watched the whole thing. I was obsessed. To this day, I'm kind of impressed at how succinct that video is, because I can't really make them like that anymore, to be honest.
That video is very succinct. It has like running gags too. My favorite one is the now listen to this, and like Snake plays the track and you play a different thing. Oh yeah, time.
I haven't rewatched that video in a real. I don't even remember most of the stuff that's in it, to be honest.
Jane, that video is so good.
I'm glad. That's from back when I was just a 20-year-old with
that
no
was
clout.
The first video of yours I ever saw, and like I was like, ooh, who's this girl? And so I was like following you ever since, and so like then we became mutuals, and now we're like doing this podcast together, and it's like, oh fun.
Yeah, life comes at you fast,
bro.
This late night recording session is so contemplative.
I know, we're like getting reflective on this, and we haven't even talked about the Hannah and Athena scene.
No.
This all started with fake red wine. Fake red wine.
We'll see how much of this you choose to cut out.
We'll see.
Okay, they are having a girls' night, and I think it's so iconic that they're having a girls' night where they just like look at pictures of human remains while drinking wine.
Yeah.
Because Athena has the picture of the skeletal remains from the cliff scene just like on her table out while she's having this girls' night with Hen.
Yep.
You know, Hen asks her about it, and Athena decides to tell Hen about how she first decided she wanted to be a cop.
Yes.
Which she had a little neighbor girl go missing when Athena was the little girl. And this mystery kind of haunted the girl's family, but also Athena's family and kind of her whole community, it sounds like. And Athena kind of pledged from that day that one day she would become a policewoman and solve crimes or figure out at least what happened in this situation.
Yeah, she wants
reveals
to like
Hen that she never did find out what happened.
She wants to give closure to families of like people who have been abducted, people who have like this like these mysteries that are like up in the air, right? And so like it's interesting like listening to her talk about this given like the context of like we've seen that episode where she goes back to her childhood town and she like you know revisits this cold case and everything. And so it's like with that context, it's like, oh, you can actually see what she's talking about. It's like one of those interesting like sensory moments, if you will. I don't know if anyone else had that experience. I think that's like one of the show's
best callbacks they've ever done.
Yeah.
Honestly, because it is actually very natural and it doesn't just feel like Tim Minear like thinking of some random character who was brought up a while back and bringing them back like for shock value. It feels like they genuinely kept that in their mind and thought, let's revisit that. And even though season 6 isn't great overall, I think that episode is nice.
Yeah, how good is that episode? I was like thinking about that. I'm like, that episode is like a really good episode. And so that
climax where that song is playing, the Lilac Wine song, and they're like, she's like chasing him through
the corn or the maze. Yeah.
Ooh, that's good.
So good.
That's good stuff.
That is a
and
good
comes
episode.
From season 6. Yeah.
Season 6.
Well, not to get ahead of ourselves.
I know, but like we're getting the saplings of it now, and so that's just interesting to like experience that in hindsight. And so like there's this sort of like a connection there between that and Hen. You know, she says that her father is like the ghost that haunts her brain. You know, she really has this
ghost callback.
Ghost, hello, he's haunting her. She's haunted.
It's like this episode is called Haunted,
right? We're getting a lot of those. But what she's really struggling with right now is that like what she wants more than anything is for her father to wake up out of this, you know, this vegetative state. Or actually, I don't think it even is that. I think it's just like fully like, you know, I think he's like, didn't they say he's like brain dead right now? It's just like the machine's giving spotty light.
Well, I think that's what a vegetative state is.
Right. Okay. So this is what you get when you stop watching Grey's after season 9.
I think vegetative state, it might be a vague term that could describe someone who's brain dead or someone who is just fully immobilized. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it means brain dead.
Yeah. Like what she's struggling with right now is what she really wants is for him to wake up out of this state and so that she can finally meet him and get to know him and everything. And so it's like he's there, but he's not. And she's reflecting on all of this, you know, time that was lost, and she doesn't know this stranger, and it's just this really interesting character drama and this like interesting like connection that you wouldn't necessarily draw from these two scenarios, but it's really it's honestly it's good to see, you know, they're just good friends. I just love them together.
Yeah, I do think it's an interesting, like a very vulnerable confession from Hen that she is kind of secretly wishing that her dad would wake up. Like that's, you know, I appreciate her saying that.
Athena and Hen, they really build on each other in like a really great way.
They do. And as we've said before, I like their friendship a lot. I will say, just in terms of Athena's whole thing, I do like this backstory of her having this motivation, and I do like when they revisit it. I will say, just to remind you that our morals are consistent.
Yeah.
In real life, cops do not solve a lot of missing persons cases.
No, they do not. No, they do not. Despite how much of a backstory they may have with the subject, The statistics don't lie.
And also, like, to be clear, Athena doesn't spend most of her days, like, solving cases like that. She mostly just, like, harasses people for minor, like, traffic violations.
No,
or, like,
seriously.
the kid joyriding or...
Seriously, I was, like, thinking, like, Athena, she wants to, like, bring closure to, like, families who have had this, like, missing thing. And yet she also spends not inconsiderable amount of her job like tearing families apart. It's like
she's not even a detective.
She's not. She's just a field sergeant. Like I'm sorry.
I don't want it to seem like we're being like extra hard on Athena. Especially when we do love to, because I got some comments about this today because like we said, we released an episode today, how we do like to be very like pro the female characters on this show. And I don't want it to seem like Athena can do no good in our eyes, because I hope we try and keep a tone of like, we really appreciate like her character development and like who she is. It's just unfortunate that she's stuck in this framework of being a cop, and that's kind of irrevocably, you know, tied to everything she does in a way that I feel like I want to comment on, so that we stay woke in the traditional sense of the term.
No, I agree. And like I feel like if it feels listening like there's a double standard with Athena specifically, it's because she's the only main character on the show that is a police officer. And so she's the one main eye into this particular world that, you know, Jane and I, as, you know, left-leaning people, as people who try to be socially aware, we have a certain perspective on the institution of the police specifically. And so we come down hard on Athena with this because she's the only cop character, basically. Everyone else is just recurring cast, if that. At Athena's precinct, I can think of, you know, maybe 2 other characters with names.
And what's depressing is like she's not even that bad as TV cops go.
Oh no, are you kidding me?
She's like pretty ethical.
No, like imagine if we were watching like Law and Order, or like, what's the Blue Bloods? Blue Bloods.
Maybe that could be a Patreon episode. We'll talk about Blue Bloods. We can finally watch the show we're always making fun of.
No, seriously, like we'll just compare TV cops in terms of ethics.
We could do a tier list.
A tier list, yes. I have a lot to say about the cast of Law and Order Special Victims Unit. So,
Elliot Stabler, you should be in prison, Loki.
Yes. Olivia Benson, you're on the fence.
Yeah, you're on thin ice. We cut to, you know, for all I complained about Eddie in the earlier scene, this is an example of like my double-edged sword of love-hate for Eddie, because Eddie is in his house with Carla, and he walks into the room dressed as Snake from Escape from New York.
Yes.
He's got like the camo pants, he's got the eye patch, he's got the little sleeveless shirt.
It's an amazing costume.
So cute.
He looks adorable.
Carla has no idea who he is. She laughs at him. And, you know, Eddie's like, I'm Snake Plissken from Escape from New York, John Carpenter's masterpiece. And I'm like, oh my God, Eddie, a John Carpenter stan? Like, come on. This guy, I have to respect that.
No, I need him to be a nerd. I need him to like where is Eddie's nerd arc? Where is his like really embarrassing film takes?
Of his extremely inconsistent characterization, one thing seems to be that he does like 80s stuff. Mm-hmm. He's into Escape from New York.
Yeah.
He's into Miami Vice, because he's the one who suggests in season 7 that he and Buck go as Crockett and Tubbs to the bachelor party.
Yeah.
So I want to believe that he's like an 80s media lover.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe my headcanon is that maybe Eddie is a bit of a movie guy.
I like that idea. And like he has this like a fixation on the 80s. Was he? I don't think he was alive in the 80s, which is interesting to think about. But
no, canonically, I don't think so.
I think he was born in the 90s, or like at least the late 80s, like Taylor Swift.
But you know, he has that nostalgia.
Yeah.
That many people his age do.
Well, I feel like also like maybe like he was in high school and he watched The Breakfast Club and it really spoke to something deep in his soul. And so ever since
Well, yeah,
then,
when Eddie was in high school, it was starting to be cool to be nostalgic about stuff like that.
exactly. So this was very formative media for him. Okay, it's all coming
Okay,
together
well,
in my
we're on
head.
the topic of Eddie headcanons.
He's
It's
gay.
the white wine talking.
No.
Well, yes. Well, yes. But also,
yes.
my headcanon is that in high school, he and Shannon were like kind of alternative kids.
Ooh,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
I want to believe that they were like into Paramore and stuff.
Yeah, they're into
And,
Paramore. I bet she had a really like soul-searching Susie and the Banshees phase.
I think she was really smart, and I think she was a theater kid, but not in an annoying way, in like a knows a lot of Shakespeare way.
Yeah, in like a she's really serious about the craft kind of way. Like she could have been an
Yeah.
actress. What if she moved to LA to become an actress, but like it just didn't happen for her?
Yeah, just for her sick mother, I would say.
I mean,
but yeah, I have this whole thing. It's so, again, like I've said before, it's so Bruce Springsteen, The River, of like, I bet they had all these big dreams and then they just had to like settle in this place, their hometown in Texas, and just like never get to do any of
Oh
that.
yeah, a very Tracy Chapman fast car, very like just like
Very
that,
Emmylou Harris, Red Dirt Girl.
yes, just that perfect encapsulation of like the sort of like the Midwest ennui of like we wanted to get out of this small town, but like life happened
The
and
small
we had
town of El Paso.
we had to put our dreams aside to take care of our son.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's classic. It's classic. And
Anyway, let me just say that Carla, not being familiar with Escape from New York, even though she is a canonically, she's a canon Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior fan, is kind of weird.
yeah, that was weird. I was like, so you'll go for Mel Gibson, but not Kurt Russell?
It's a little strange.
Downgrade?
She does have a funny line where she like a mom, she says, "Though I'm disappointed that costume didn't come with a smile." And Eddie sort of sadly, pathetically, oh my god, this is like my favorite part of the scene. He like sadly takes off his eye patch and says, "Me and Shannon had a fight." I just love, I love this. This was, again, I liked Eddie again in this scene.
That shot of Eddie standing in the hallway dejectedly taking off his eye patch, I don't know why. Maybe it's because we mentioned Degrassi earlier, but it reminds me so much of Sayonara, Miles Hollingsworth.
Sayonara, Miles Hollingsworth. Sayonara, Eddie Diaz.
Oh, Shannon should have had a moment like that, but she didn't.
She should have.
But
you are a terrible person.
But instead, he sort of
use and abuse people, and I forget the entire monologue. One day you're gonna wake up and find that you have no one, and I am so glad that I won't be here for that sad day.
Sayonara, Miles Hollingsworth. Top 10 monologues.
Too many months now, my heart's been fighting this war.
I want to hear it in a monologue competition, like in a high school or something.
Same.
But yeah, so he opens up about like the sort of the Shannon fight and everything. It was, his first time seeing her in 2 years, and yada yada yada. Eddie is. I don't want to be dismissive about it because I know there are some Eddie stans that take this monologue very seriously and take this storyline very seriously.
Carla mentions, she's like, is that why you moved to a place 30 minutes from where she lives? And I was like, 30? They have been living 30 minutes from where Shannon lives, and they didn't even tell her they moved there? Like, that's deranged.
That's crazy, right? And do you think Chris knows that Shannon moved to LA? That she's in town?
Apparently he doesn't. It seems like he doesn't. I'm so confused at like what level of communication any of these people had with each other when she left.
Yeah.
It just doesn't really make sense.
It's almost like they were writing Eddie's storyline on the fly and just like adding new stuff every episode.
It does feel a little like that, doesn't it?
It does a little
But then
bit.
Christopher comes out in the cutest little Wolverine costume.
Oh,
he looks so cute.
He looks so cute.
Oh my god.
Little Logan with his chops and his claws and his tank top.
And he just like always has that huge smile on his face, especially in these early seasons. He's so adorable.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're so scary, buddy. Sorry, I know I shouldn't be condescending because I know it's the whole thing about him, but it's just like, oh, little 5-year-old Christopher, he's so scary.
He's 7, okay?
Sorry, 7.
Totally different.
It's totally different
But
age.
then we cut to what appears to be like a Halloween rave.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Halloween rave
outside
with the Halloween theme.
Yes, they're playing like a remixed rave version of the Halloween theme. Also a John Carpenter movie.
Carpenter. Hello.
Eagle-eyed viewers will notice. And this little girl is dressed as Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz.
Oh my God.
She meets
Went right to my heart
with his horse.
Went right to my heart. By the way, this little girl dressed as Dorothy. I love Dorothy so much, so I was just very happy to see that. But yeah, she meets this cop and his horse in training. It is not just a horse; it's a horse in training. He's like training the horse to be like a cop horse or whatever.
What's his name? City Slicker.
City Slicker.
Name is City Slicker.
Yes.
And this scene, we'll talk about this scene, but basically, the girl meets the horse. She has a little bonding moment with the cop and his horse. And suddenly there's like a fire breather. I'm so confused as to what this event was. Like, was it a rave? Was it an all ages thing? Because a child is here.
It looks like all ages, like a city thing going on in like a public park and all that.
I guess some kind of Halloween party. And this fire breather is, breathing fire.
He's
and
dressed as Satan, by the way. He's dressed as Satan.
Yes.
And this pseudo drag queen comes over with like a wig full of hairspray and
wig full of hairspray catches on fire.
This
kind of starts a little commotion in the crowd, and the whole thing spooks the horse.
Yeah.
And, cut to a 911 call. The 118 arrives. The horse is like badly injured. And as we all know, horses, I don't really know exactly why, but horses have that thing where like if they get just a little too injured, you kind of have to put them down.
Yeah. I think like Hen mentions like in this call, like they're like really susceptible to infection. She rattles off a lot of
horse info.
Antibiotics aren't super effective. Maybe Hen was a horse girl. Maybe that was like a piece of her backstory they left out.
Oh, that's so cute. That's a new hen horse headcanon.
Yes.
Is that she was a horse girl. That is the funniest thing.
And this horse gets like fucked up too. Like it's not just like a minor like a sprained ankle or something like that. Like this horse
it's got
is like
something on its face.
Yeah, it's like this horse got like run through the ringer, and so it's like you kind of like at this point it's like the horse is suffering. There's like not much you can do because the horse is gonna get infected. It's gonna die. It's gonna be agonizing, and like
the horse is on the ground, and basically the Hen starts to imply that they're gonna have to put the horse down. The cop, the handler of this horse, seems aware of that.
Yeah,
and so they start to do that. And I wrote down in my notes that this scene is basically, it's such despicable propaganda to me because obviously if you show me any cute animal being put down, like, I'm gonna be sad about it. That's just how it works. But I fundamentally don't believe in the utility of cops having horses, nor do I like cops at all, as we were just talking about. And so this whole thing feels extremely emotionally manipulative.
It is. ACAB includes the horses, is what we're saying. But
or it's kind of like the cop dog thing, where it's just like we should not be training these animals to be cops, you know, to work for cops.
Definitely, and it's like it's just putting them more in harm's way. It's like you just get to be.
There's even a line where the guy is, when he's like, putting down the horse, he's kind of whispering all these sweet nothings to the horse, and he's saying like. He says, you'll be running through a field of sage. You can just be a horse again. And I was like, okay, so even that the horse doesn't want to work, that the horse wasn't born to be a cop.
It's like this horse should have been a horse, just like run free. I feel like that you can say that on some levels, like about just like a lot of animal workers, but there's something like in particularly insidious about making an animal like a horse in an urban setting like LA, or like I see them all the time in New York, work for the police force. It's like, what are they getting out of this? What's the horse getting out of this?
For the record, there are some animals who like are kind of naturally suited to like doing certain jobs. Like I'm not about to be like, it's unethical to have like a service dog or whatever. Like there are animals who like to do that kind of thing.
Hey, blind people, watch it. You're on thin ice.
But like it's clear that like, police forces do not need to have a horse in the year of our Lord 2025.
Yeah, it's like
especially not in a big city.
It's like a rung below like circus elephants, like to me, but
it's also, not to be a downer, but cops shoot a ridiculous amount of their own dogs every year. Like look it up. There's a whole thing of like cops accidentally shoot their own dogs constantly.
Jesus Christ.
And they'll shoot your dog too. They also shoot other people's dogs.
They will
But like
shoot
for
your
the
dog.
record, like their own dogs that are working for them get fucking caught in the line of fire all the time.
Did you see that news story about that cop that shot a chihuahua? Or like a little
No.
like a little itty bitty dog that like ran after
did
him because he was like stopping at a house and everything. Like a small little tiny dog ran barking up to him, just being a little territorial as small dogs often are, and he shot it in the face and it died.
Jesus Christ.
ACAB. I'm sorry. ACAB. I'm not sorry. ACAB.
So that's why, like, yes, if you show me a horse and you tell me that it's dying, I'll be like, oh, that's sad. But like, I feel like this whole scene is so obnoxious in its emotional manipulation of that thing. And there's like this cringeworthy scene where like all the cops are like joining hands.
Oh my God, the horse funeral, the cop
gets
funeral for the horse.
And you know, the little Dorothy girl comes over and comforts the guy. And it's like, wow. So emotional.
I gotta say, and like
off.
maybe this is just like me. It was like working on me too, because like I'm.
No, it was. Yeah, I always shed a tear during this scene,
I was like,
and that's what pisses me off.
I know. I was like really feeling. I wrote down on my notes. I literally wrote down one note. They gonna pull the plug on Mr. Horsey. Oh God! And then right below that, I wrote in all caps, "Why am I crying over this horse?"
It happens to me every time. It does.
Every time.
And you know, though. You know, tying into the rest of the episode, what's funny is they sort of draw a parallel between putting down the horse and a hen pulling the plug on her dad.
Oh yeah, she can't put down
Bobby
the
ends up
horse for
taking
some
over.
reason. She can't like inject the morphine because it's like it's too hard. It's a horse. It's sad, and she's thinking about her dad. And so Bobby has to take over with the injection, despite the fact that I don't think he's trained to do that. Like, how's he gonna find the vein?
Yeah, true. He's not even an EMT.
Right, but
Well,
like I guess it
apparently
works.
it worked.
Maybe. Oh God, imagine if he missed and he had to break out the fire axe. No, I can't.
Stop. They would not have to break out the axe.
No, they wouldn't. But like okay. Here's the thing about horses with me. I'm like when I see a horse. First of all, I'm intrigued and I'm fascinated. I'm taken by like the mysterious awe of like seeing a magnificent animal like a horse. But I'm also terrified. A horse is a crazy animal. That's a crazy animal. If they kick you, you die.
I used to do horseback riding as like an 11-year-old. I kind of got into it and I found like some camps you could go to. And I did like occasional lessons as an 11-year-old until we like lost touch with the trainer or whatever. Yeah. And I remember like my first horseback riding lesson, they were like telling me how to give a horse a treat. And they were like, yeah, you have to always make sure that your hand is like open and flat. Like you keep your palm flat or else they'll just like bite off your fingers.
Yeah, they'll just eat your hand.
I was like, oh, okay. This is a terrifying creature.
It's like, it's giant too. And it's fully integrated with human society. And it's like this ridiculous like thing with skull crushing hooves that doesn't look like any other animal that exists. And it's just like, what even is a horse? Like, I feel like it's been so normalized that you don't even question it. But when you think about it, like, what is a horse? It's not like anything else. And see, when you see a horse, it's just like,
there are like donkeys and zebras and stuff.
I know, but like that's not like that's not like in a bonk. Well, I guess a donkey.
Animals.
It's like an equine animal isn't like anything else. It's not like a camel or like a cow, which at least has like.
Well, okay, but is like a bird like anything else?
It's like other birds.
So you're just mad that like horses aren't a broad enough category?
Well, it's not like you have like a pet horse in the way that you have like a pet dog.
I mean, people who are horse people probably would disagree.
Well, but it's just like there's no like, okay, maybe no, this is my hang up. Whenever I voice this to anyone,
I'm just playing horses devil's advocate.
They always fight me on this. Everyone always fights me on this. I always voice it to my friends and they're like always upset with me. They're like, Ryan, it's just a fucking horse. It's not a big deal. But I'm like, what the fuck is a horse?
You would understand if you had spent the 5th grade chilling with a horse named Duchess that you got to ride sometimes.
I fucking did. I took horseback lessons in 3rd grade, and I was not afraid of the horse then. But you know what got me afraid of the horse? What got me afraid of the horse was watching those farmers cleaning their hooves on TikTok and just thinking, man, one wrong move and they die.
So That made you afraid of horses?
Yes!
That's kind of weird. That's Evan Buckley's favorite content. Remember?
Well, no, he likes the cow cleaning hooves.
Oh, and that's so different?
That is different because cows are wonderful.
All right.
Anyways, that's my hot tea with horses. I just had to air
Okay. I don't know. I think the horse girls would get pretty mad about that. And you don't want to get on the wrong side of a horse girl.
Oh, no, the Swifties are going to come after me.
Literally.
Yeah.
The horse girl to Swiftie pipeline. I'm sure that goes crazy.
Yeah, I didn't like Bad Blood either. Fight me.
It's kind of crazy that she hasn't released like a horse girl album.
I mean,
like that she doesn't have any. Does she have any song? Wait, no, she does have a song about horses. She has White Horse.
I guess Speak Now is kind of a horse girl album.
And your white horse.
I feel like Speak Now is kind of a horse girl album in that like it's what every horse girl was listening to in 2010. That's like
I was thinking more Fearless is probably more horse girl.
Fearless
era.
is very horse girl, but like I don't know, something about like You Belong With Me in that era is more like, to me that evokes more like the high school like lockers.
Yeah,
you know,
and
in
that
the
song is
hallway.
from Fearless, Ryan.
I know, that's what I'm saying. And so like I feel like Speak Now for me is more like you're in the barn, you're riding your horse with your little earbuds
I thought you were
in.
saying You Belong With Me feels more like Speak Now or whatever.
No, I was saying You Belong With Me.
You were wrong. Factually.
No, I was saying You Belong With Me, which is on Fearless, reminds me more of like the high school lockers. Whereas Speak Now, the album, gives me like I'm riding a horse in the barn at the stable. And
I feel like, for one thing, I think the high school vibe and the horse vibe are very much not mutually exclusive. It's like you're a teenage girl with a horse. And also, I guess Speak Now to me always feels like that bridge between like her doing country music and her doing pop music, because Speak Now is like her most pop punk album. And so I guess it feels less horse girl to me.
right, okay, maybe I'm thinking like, because like when like I'm thinking like in Fearless, like you have like a man and that doesn't work out, and so like in Speak Now era you get a horse to replace him.
Like what song specifically would you ride a horse to?
Well, I don't know, hold on, let me pull up the list. Okay, I have my Taylor stuff in my notes app. It's all the way back here because I was making my video a while ago.
Because I'm thinking like White Horse, You're on a Horse, Love Story. There are probably some horses in there.
Okay, Speak Now. Okay, Mine is totally a horse girl anthem.
Mine is not a horse song.
Yes,
that's
it
like
is.
A living in a small city with your boyfriend song.
No, you don't understand. You're on your horse to process the breakup. You're like a
But
riding.
that song's not about a breakup.
It
It's
was
about
on Glee
a
when
reunion.
Santana broke up with Britney.
Okay, well, you are basing this off of Glee, not
Okay.
off the original
Also,
text.
Never Grow Up. She's riding a horse, connecting with her inner child.
If you say so. Do you even know these songs?
And then Haunted, the acoustic version. I mean, let's be honest.
I feel like you are pulling this out of your ass, sir.
No, what I'm saying is you listen to these songs like on the horse to process like an emotional time in your life.
Listen, guys, Severance watchers. I'm feeling like Irving B clocking Helly R right now, because if you were a real Swiftie, I think you would have said Enchanted feels like the horse girl song.
I'm
off
not
that
a real
album.
Swiftie. How many times have we
fair
been
enough.
over this?
Fair enough.
I haven't even listened to the vault tracks yet. I'm sorry.
I think we should probably move on to the next thing in the episode now.
Yeah, this is why we don't
So-
record at night. It's 1 a.m. where I am.
Yeah. I just turned midnight where I am.
The
So
Grant
after
family. Okay, no, not the Grant
After
family.
they pull the plug on the horse,
Yeah.
that's reminding Hen of pulling the plug on her dad. We cut to Athena informing the wife that she has tracked down, the wife of the dead hiker.
Yeah, his
that
name
the hiker
is.
died.
His name is. I have it written down. His name is. Actually, wait, where is it written down? His name is Alex Armando Perez. And so she goes to the house of his widower, his baby mama, I guess. I don't know what their exact relationship is.
She goes to the house of the woman. I don't know if she's the wife or the girlfriend, the bereaved woman of this man, and breaks the news to her. And, obviously this woman gets very emotional, and she kind of expresses how nobody believed her at the time when she was, I think the guy had like a criminal record or something.
Yeah, he was like 6
And-
months out of jail or something like that.
Yeah, and everybody assumed that he had run off, but she was sure that something else had happened. And so getting this news is really sad, but it's also like really validating in a way, and kind of finally is bringing her this closure, which is what Athena expressed wanting to do and have fulfill her in her career. So it's kind of a nice moment for both of them.
Athena, it's actually an interesting moment. She opens the door and like Alana, who's Alex's I'm just gonna say widow. She she has the bowl of candy and everything. It's Halloween, and she's expecting a trick-or-treat moment, and Athena says, I have to talk to you about Alex, and she like almost like drops the bowl, and like Athena catches it. It's just like a little like moment of like acting. It's like I like that little moment. I like that little moment of her catching the bowl.
It's kind of very high potential on ABC, if anybody's been watching that show with Dee from It's Always Sunny.
Oh, I heard good things about that show.
I've been watching. It's like not amazing, but the characters are fun, and the lead actress is really good. And anyway, there's a thread on that show where she has like a partner who went missing years ago, and she's trying to get to the bottom of it, and kind of a similar thing of like nobody believes her that he didn't just run off, and that there was actually a mystery there.
Yeah, no, she's great. I love her in everything, so that'd be a fun watch, honestly. Patreon.
True, we could do that.
But
from there we go to Eddie is waiting outside of the school because Shannon has just completed her meeting with the people at this school. Apparently it's required for both the mother and father of a child looking to enroll in this school to meet with the school. So whatever, Shannon's just getting out. She's wearing this adorable yellow sundress.
Yes.
It looks so pretty on her.
So cute.
Can we just say, oh my God.
Yeah. I love her, like her look with like the bangs and like sort of like the messy curly hair look.
She just looks so effortlessly gorgeous.
Yeah.
Know?
And also like, I gotta say like people who call Shannon selfish. I mean, if she wanted to be selfish, she could have just knocked on to the interview, but she did because she cares about her son, and she cares more about her son and like sort of like setting him up for like success than she does about like any awkwardness or unresolved tension with Eddie. So she goes to the interview and he's waiting outside, and he's sort of like talking to her, and she wants to go to her car and just like leave.
Well, they start to talk again, and they end up getting to the heart of one of their conflicts, which is, I want to bring this up because Shannon expresses that she has these insecurities about this idea that she like quote unquote caused Christopher's disability and feels guilty about it, and therefore, kind of tried to look into all these things and felt like a failure, and that's like implied to be part of the reason she left, because she felt like she had failed as a mother in some way.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of people in the fandom bring this up as like a she's ableist thing. And I guess I just want to say I think that's like a really, really unempathetic read of what's going on here.
Yeah, that's not the read I got at all.
No, it's like, for one thing, I will say, yes, the idea that someone's disability is A, like necessarily a bad thing at all, or B, is like caused by any specific thing or like the fault of someone. Those are all kind of problematic ideas. I think despite that, if there's anything problematic about this, I feel like this is one of those moments where you have to zoom in and be like, okay, Shannon isn't a real person, but the people who wrote this are real people.
Yeah.
And like, if you want to critique the ableism present in any of those sentiments, I think it is a lot more productive to be like, oh, this is the product of writers, than to be like Shannon Diaz herself is ableist. Because like, listen to yourself, that doesn't really make any sense. But also, I would say, yes, those sentiments are kind of ableist, and also sometimes people have irrational feelings like that.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that they don't exist. And she kind of
saying.
Acknowledges that in this scene. She does. She says, because, Eddie tells her like, this wasn't your fault and you don't have to feel bad. And she says, I know that, but I don't feel it. She says that. So I think it's also like, that's kind of acknowledged in this scene, that she knows rationally. She knows that it's an irrational feeling, and yet she feels it. And that makes sense because, socially we do stigmatize these things, especially when it comes to the responsibility of mothers. Yeah. And I think they mentioned at one point that Christopher's cerebral palsy was because he got like stuck in the birth canal or something. So socially you would blame a mother for that. Like, mothers do get blamed for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yes, the feeling is irrational, but that doesn't mean she's not feeling it. And I think it's extremely unempathetic to act like this is just Shannon being ableist as opposed to like Shannon experiencing a human emotion that is valid in some ways.
Yeah, and it's honestly, it's not even wrong to represent that necessarily. I do think it was, I guess, messy how it was written, and I totally understand. I want to like state plainly, I understand the frustration of watchers of the show who felt uncomfortable or marginalized by sort of the way that this sort of was discussed with these characters. It's a really weird thing to talk about because, you know, Eddie's whole thing is like not wanting Chris to be sort of like condescended to or to be, you know, sort of like marginalized in the sense of where like people treat him with kids' gloves and they do everything for him and, you know, all that stuff. And yet at the same time, like he's the one over here like telling Shannon like it's not your fault and everything. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like I understand, I guess, empathically sort of like the feelings that a parent in the situation would be going through, even if I don't, you know, agree necessarily.
Or like most insecurities are irrational and maybe even come from like problematic places, quote unquote, but you still feel them. And, you know, I think it's kind of honest for her to express that.
Yeah.
And just in general, again, even if there are problematic dimensions to this, I think that's an issue to take up with the writing, not to just like pretend that Shannon is this real life person who sucks and is ableist. And also, to be clear, even if you are kind of treating the narrative like that as if these are real people, it's not like Eddie takes a stand in this scene and is like, actually, that's an ableist thing to say. Like, he's fully
Could you imagine
her on these same terms.
Could you imagine? He's like, actually, Shannon, that is a very problematic thing to say. And like, your son is fully capable in many other ways. Like, it's a ridiculous notion. And also, can we do away with the idea that every piece of character writing has to be like a moral judgment in some way? Like, why can't characters...
But Ryan, this is a fandom.
Jane, all I'm saying is, why can't characters be allowed to, like, you know, have flaws or moments of weakness or be a little messy, you know, or like have insecurities and like it's not rational, but it's emotionally true to them. And, you know, is it right? No, but like it doesn't have to be right all the time in order for it to be interesting drama. Why don't you guys want like, drama in your show?
Again, it's kind of just like the human experience of like, yeah, sometimes you do have kind of flawed emotions and feelings, and it's part of life. Yeah. You know, I don't think this scene is really validating that hugely. It's not saying that this is some, I don't know. I think the rest of the show does okay at like not acting like Christopher's disability is like a problem or something, or like some mistake to be corrected, you know? So I think I think they meant to just have her be expressing the very human kind of society fueled insecurity about this. And again, it's kind of like as a mother, she gets judged for these things in a way that a father might not. And so, you know, you can kind of understand why she might have had that insecurity like thrust upon her.
Yeah. And it is worth noting that like you said, the rest of the show isn't overly concerned with the idea, like, you know, whose fault is this sort of like, you know, disability or anything. It's not like Eddie like has like this weird arc where he gets really into stem cell research or something. Like, you know,
they're not going to cure him.
Most of the rest of the show, when it comes to like Christopher's disability, if it's touched upon, you know, I mean, Christopher is written, you know, very three-dimensionally, and so his disability is just one facet of his character. But when they do touch upon his disability in storylines, it's more so about accommodating than it is about, you know, sort of the search for a cure, as it were.
No, certainly not.
You know?
So I don't know. It just seems, I think realistically, the writers were probably just looking for like a motivation for why she left. Like, I think they were probably just trying to add depth to Shannon. Yeah. And it is kind of a played out trope about disabilities. And again, I would say that's the writer's fault. That's not Shannon, the person's fault. Yeah. This was a big thing I felt when I was like dealing with like the Tristan from Degrassi hate. Back to Tristan from Degrassi.
Let's talk about him. Let's talk about it.
People would act like he was a real person doing bad things or like problematic things. And I would be like, you guys, like if Tristan said a biphobic thing that never got addressed by the narrative, that's just the writers being biphobic. That's not Tristan, the real life person, doing that. Like, how stupid are we?
Right? Like, if the show supports it, then that's just the show being biphobic, and that's a problem. Like, take it up with the show. But like, there are like moments where it's like, okay, I have a whole thesis about this with Kurt and Glee. The biggest
Sure.
the biggest fault people have with Kurt, that they point to as like a moral failing of his character, was when he did a biphobia to Blaine in season 2, episode 14, Blame It on the Alcohol. Right.
Of course.
And like what people forget.
We all remember where we were.
We all remember. Okay. But what people forget about that scene is that in sort of the context, it was basically just Kurt reacting to this threat that was Rachel honing in on his territory. And so it was a very defensive sort of low blow swipe at Blaine to try and dismiss his bisexuality in order to take out a romantic rival, you know. And so in that
He's
context,
kind of just acting
of
like a
the show,
16-year-old.
Exactly. He's just acting like an immature 16-year-old who's using this sort of like biphobic, you know, sort of offense as a way of swiping away. It's a utilitarian use of it, is what I mean to say. So
utilitarian biphobia.
Yeah, so in character, it sort of makes sense for his character, right? In that context, it makes sense.
It was also 2011, and it was also Ryan Murphy.
Exactly.
So, like, really,
More
are we going to blame
context.
Kurt, or should we blame that adult man with a history of weird beliefs expressed in his work?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So anyway, that is that on Shannon in this scene. But the way this scene ends is that they just start making out with each other.
What's your read on this scene?
Shetty is back.
Shetty.
My read on this scene. Shetty. It sounds so romantic. My read on this scene is, I wrote in my notes, oh, these two are bad for each other.
Yeah.
You can just feel that they're only trauma bonded, and that's it.
Oh, yeah.
It's the way they get back into each other when they start like being miserable together again. I feel like the only passion they must have ever felt in their relationship, like at least once they got pregnant, is like being trauma bonded, essentially. That's kind of my read.
No, I totally agree. I will say though, I was kind of happy for Shannon, because I know for a fact that is the best dick of her entire life. And so for now,
stop it.
For one night, let me just say, get your bag, Shannon. Get your bag.
That man's gay, first of all.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like she could do so much better.
The best dick of her life so far.
I don't feel happy for Shannon.
So far.
And I know what's going to happen to her, and I'm just thinking, get out of there, girl. Find somebody else. Move out of this state, possibly.
Get
Maybe
your
just
associates.
take the kid and run.
Yeah.
But from there,
it ends on them making out. Yeah.
Yeah, they're hardcore making out.
Ooh.
And from there we go to Buck and Carla are at Abby's house, and Buck has invited Carla over there because he kind of wants a neutral third party to give him some perspective on this. He mentions that everybody in his life is on his side. He kind of wants to talk to somebody on Abby's side.
And she's like, I don't have sides. She's like, I'm Switzerland. I don't have sides. She's Team Abby. Let's be real.
And he kind of starts talking about this whole situation, and like you said earlier, like how it's been weeks since they last talked or something. It's really sounding like they've just drifted further and further apart.
Yep.
And he mentions being haunted by this memory of her.
Ooh.
But maybe I'm the ghost. Great line.
And we never had an Evanescence haunted needle drop, and it wouldn't have fit with the episode, but I wanted it so bad.
Not even a Taylor Swift haunted needle drop off of her Horse Girl album, Speak Now.
Yes. It's interesting. We learned a bit about what Abby's been up to recently, in that her brother is going to have her stay with her for a little bit. And so it really seems like, it really seems like she is not coming back anytime soon, if at all, which we knew. To be frank, we knew she wasn't coming back to LA. But I feel like Buck finding that out was kind of like the final nail in the coffin of like,
Literally,
back.
the nail in the coffin at the graveyard,
at
full
the
circle.
graveyard where he's being haunted by the ghosts of this past romance. And so basically like ends on this like moment of like Buck finally comes to terms with the fact that he has to move out. This relationship is over. It has been for a while, and he's finally ready to face that and move on. And we get this scene sort of interspersed, if you will, with Hen at her dad's hospital bed. And she's talking about how she used to, when she was a little girl, she used to write him letters. You know, she used to write him letters about everything that was going on in her life, about making the honors roll, about, you know, wanting to kiss her best friend. And her mom always said, we'll mail them to your dad as soon as we have his address. And they never got it. And so he sort of became her diary. He sort of this mental image in her head of this man who she didn't really know sort of became this figurehead for her to voice everything that was happening in her life. Here he is, and he didn't get to hear about any of it, really, except from afar, through newspapers.
Yeah, she mentions at some point that he's some ghost in a hospital bed.
Ghosts.
But it is sad. It's like one of those things where you just like know you've missed an opportunity in life and like a door's closing that can never be reopened.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say about this storyline is it did feel a little like weightless just because we had never heard about Hen's dad prior to this episode.
We had never heard about him
never
once.
Really hear about him again. So it feels like a little bit like, why do I care? But if you like just take it for what it is, it's pretty emotional.
I agree, but I do agree that like it would have hit a lot more if we had known about Hen's familial situation before this.
Yes,
like,
if this had like ever been a source of conflict for her.
Let me just say, like, sort of the parent stuff, like the dying stuff, like that's like something that like it gets me every time. And I didn't really cry during this scene or like this storyline. Right. And I don't know why that was. I think it literally was because it sort of came out of left field and it didn't really have a lot of buildup. And so we have this like very beautiful, like emotional crescendo with Hen, but because it didn't have that buildup to it, it just feels flat. Yeah, which is unfortunate. Unfortunate. We had opportunities to explore that before, and they just didn't pounce on him, I guess.
But we get sort of an ending, like you said, like cutting back and forth between the Hen stuff, pulling the plug, and Buck leaving Abby's house, and we're back to the Buck voiceover. He has this little spiel about we are all haunted. He's back to being emo in his voiceover.
Right.
He leaves a handwritten letter to Abby, which is so dramatic of him.
Can feel you here.
So dramatic. And also, I wrote in my notes, do we think his handwriting in that letter was at all intelligible or not?
What, between the tear stains? And he's like, no, I know. We'll always be together
like
in my mind.
In the fandom. I think there's like a joke in the fandom that there's some scene at some point where he writes, maybe it's a note for like Christopher or something, and we see a little bit of it, and it's like his handwriting is just awful. Or no, it's May's grad party, I think, in season 3, or maybe it's season 4, where he like writes a little note for her, like congrats, and it is like completely illegible. And so I want to believe that he like, you know, painstakingly wrote this handwritten letter, and then she like gets back to her house and finds it, and she's like, what the fuck does this say? He has the handwriting of like a 4th grader.
But by the way, how long do you think it took for Abby to get back to her apartment and find that letter? Do you think, how much dust was there on there by that point? Do you think you could even read her name on there? Do you think
do you think she was like at all pissed that he like stopped house sitting for her and didn't bother to find a replacement?
Right. It's like, who's gonna dust off my couch?
Home,
you know?
Yeah, she gets home, it's covered in an inch of dust, all her plants are dead.
And it's like, damn it, Buck, you had one job. Just wait for me until I came home.
Yeah. No.
That's so depressing.
It was right of him to leave. But yeah, I was just sort of laughing at the implications. Also, this scene starts to play a song. Did you notice this?
No.
Okay. It's a song called I Found by Amber Runn.
Yes, I do.
And
I saw this on the IMDb.
recognized it as having been in a lot of TV shows, kind of similarly to Heartbeats by Jose Gonzalez.
Right.
So I wanted to, similarly to that, I wanted to read you a list of all of the TV shows this has appeared in.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Let's hear it.
It's that song, for any of our listeners, it's that song that's like, I'll use you as a warning sign, you know. You know it.
I know it was on the Vampire
Okay.
Diaries already. I already know it was.
Well, close. It was
Okay.
used in season 6, episode 12 of Pretty Little Liars.
Okay.
It was used in season 5, episode 8 of, you guessed it, Teen Wolf.
Yes.
I think that's probably where I recognized it from.
Season 5, episode 8. Was that like a Liam and Hayden scene or something? Like, what was the
Ooh,
context?
Let me see. Season 5, episode 8, Ouroboros. I don't remember. Season 5 is such a skip.
It's such a skip. It's the biggest skip on the entire
It was
show.
used in season 3, episode 3 of Saving Hope.
Yeah.
It was used in also season 3, episode 3 of Rain.
Oh,
Season
I
2,
heard about
episode
that show, yeah.
23 of Finding Carter. 1, 2,
fuck is
3,
Finding
4.
Carter?
I vaguely recognize the name.
Okay.
It was used in 1, 2, 3, 4, count 'em, 4 episodes of Love Island.
Oh. Okay.
2 episodes of a show called Shots Fired.
Never heard
1
of it.
episode of 911. 1 episode of a show called A Discovery of Witches. 1 episode of a show called Maxton Hall, The World Between Us, which is the most recent one. I had to look this up. It is like a German, seemingly Wattpad style, like teen romance show. I just want to like read you the description of this real quick. So this show, Ruby unwittingly witnesses an explosive
Ruby,
secret at the
Jesus.
public school Maxton Hall. As a result, the arrogant millionaire heir James Beaufort has to deal with the quick-witted scholarship student for better or for worse.
Right.
Worse.
Okay.
Sounds awesome.
That sounds
gonna
fantastic.
lie.
Do you think that show exists, or do you think it's just synopses and posters?
That's a great question. It says it came out May 9th, 2024.
Right. And to all the people who have watched it, I hope you had fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it lived up to your expectations. I hope you had a good time with it.
It says it was based on a book called Save Me, which I'm trying to figure out if it literally was a Wattpad book, and I honestly can't tell.
That sounds like a Wattpad fanfic, because
It really does.
like, what published
Millionaire
book is going to
heir?
come out called Save Me?
Save Me about millionaire heir James Beaufort.
Beaufort.
That's crazy. Well, anyway, so that's that. Also, the cover of this book very much looks like a Colleen Hoover cover.
Okay, I was just thinking Colleen Hoover. I'm like, there's only one person that would write a book called Save Me, and it's Colleen. Are you sure we didn't
Right.
she didn't write the book called Save
Shatter
Me?
Me, isn't that a book by Colleen Hoover?
Right. Oh, that is a book, yeah.
Anyway, all this to say that this song, I Found by Amber Runn, is kind of similar to Heartbeats. It's been used in a lot of TV shows.
Yeah, it's like Chasing Cars, Snow Patrol, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And finally, the episode ends. Well, there's one line where Buck says in voiceover, "You are my ghost story, Abby." It's the Halloween episode, you
Crawling
guys.
in my skin. I love emo Buck.
If you
I can't
love
get
me,
enough of
let me
emo
go.
Buck that loves Linkin Park. I can't.
It's great. And that just about concludes Haunted.
Yeah.
Our very first Halloween episode. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. A little bit of propaganda thrown in.
A strangely
little bit of confusing
light
Shannon
episode.
Diaz stuff.
I don't know why I expected more from this. It was like strangely light. Did you feel that?
I mean, it did include Hen's dad dying, Shannon being introduced, and Buck getting over Abby. I feel like that's
I know.
a lot.
That's why I'm saying it's strange, but like it leaves me with this feeling of like, I like the episode and I thought it did like a lot of like really interesting stuff for the story, but like it leaves me with this sort of like sense of like, I don't know how to explain it other than like I was watching it and I'm like, oh, that episode felt short. I don't know why. I don't know why. Maybe it's because some of the storylines felt kind of half-baked, as it were.
Yeah, fair enough. This episode was written by Erica L. Anderson, who also wrote Season 1, Episode 5, Point of Origin, and Season 2, Episode 12, Chimney Begins, which is a great episode.
Shit.
But those are her only 2 episodes.
So she got better sort of like as the show went on, it seems.
Maybe, although Chimney Begins is her last episode, so she didn't really get a chance to fly any higher than that.
But that episode is so beloved by the fandom and everything, so I don't know. I feel like we'll watch that and we'll be blown away.
I think there are plenty of good things in this episode. Like, I liked it overall. I love the ghost called 911 recurring thing. That's one of my all-time faves.
I was confused why we didn't get like a wrap-up with that at all.
Well, the wrap-up is the wife getting told that the guy died.
That's true.
But you're right. In terms of the paranormal part, we never actually find out.
It's just canonically true that a ghost called 911. It's just canonically true.
This is what I said in my video. They never actually explain what happened with the 911 call, so we just are to assume that a ghost literally called 911. And again, that I would say is a slay on Erica's part. That is awesome. That's hilarious.
What were we just talking about? That this show is in the same universe as Supernatural?
Supernatural, yeah.
It shares
you guys
a
are on a
restaurant.
Discord server now with some other 911 podcasters. Because there are like a bunch of us now.
And we were all talking about how like it has a shared universe. 911 and Supernatural are in a shared universe because of they had a same restaurant, right? A same fictitious restaurant across 2 shows.
It was a gas station, right? It was the
gas station. It was like
something and sip.
Yeah, like a gas and sip or something. I don't know. What do you call it?
I forget. I haven't watched Supernatural in so long.
Same. Oh my god. I had the idea of like, what if I watched through it again? I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
This might be controversial, but I tried rewatching the first couple episodes a while back, and I was so bored. I found it really boring.
I feel like it is boring, and like no one wants to admit it, but that show is so... I'm sorry, can I say this? That show is really lame.
It's really straight, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I get that Destiel came out of it, and I respect that, and Destiel was real. I acknowledge that. I also think it's one of those things where, like, the showrunners were fighting it so hard because clearly their original vision was so straight.
Yeah.
And so macho. The whole thing, it's like the guy was inspired by the X-Files, but it's like if the X-Files was just like a macho man show.
Yeah.
With none of the kind of, like, androgynous intrigue of the X-Files. The whole appeal of the X-Files is that you have this awesome like butch woman and this sexy little feminine man.
It's like
and they're besties and they're into each other.
It's like if both Mulder and Scully were brothers and they were both played by Celie Booth. Like not like if they were the character Celie Booth, but like if they were David Boreanaz as Celie Booth playing brothers on a TV show.
And so I don't want to anger any Supernatural fans because like I get it. I get whatever you like about it. I do get that. And also I feel like it's sort of like the Eddie thing. It's like I get why everybody likes him, and also there are some like unavoidable truths about the actual canon text.
Oh my god. So with that, do we want to call it here before we incur the wrath of how many fandoms can we piss off in one episode? Because
what did we get this time?
We got Supernatural, we got the Eddie fans. I probably got some Swifties against me. I feel like we're just like batting like 3-0 at this point. So
queens of kicking hornets' nests.
Exactly. Just like us.
We appreciate you listening, and remember to rate us 5 stars.
Leave us a comment with all of your hot takes, your spicy hot takes.
Yeah, go ahead. What did we even talk about in this episode? Let us know. I'm already getting a lot of comments on the previous episode about how grateful you all are to hear from fellow Taylor lovers. So I'm excited to hear from all my fellow Shannon lovers with this episode. I look forward to that.
That will be great. Sorry, I had a moment where I forgot that Taylor Kelly was in the last episode. I'm like, wait, Taylor Swift? Wait. Right.
Same difference.
A fellow Taylor lovers. No, honestly, we would love to hear about the Shannon Diaz lovers. And if you're a Shannon Diaz hater, just stop listening. Honestly, go to one of the other ones.
Stop it. Get some help.
Stop it. Get some help. There's so many 911 podcasts nowadays. I'm sure
there are a ton of them.
You can find your mojo somewhere else.
More are springing up every day.
This is a Shannon Diaz safe space.
Shannon Diaz and Taylor Kelly safe space.
Thank you.
We love them.
Thank you.
Nothing but respect for our girls.
We love messy women on this pod. That's on period.
And Devin Kelly, who plays Shannon, who's from Minneapolis, if you're listening, hit us up.
Yes, Devin, come on the pod.
We would love to have you.
We promise to be extremely normal.
Yeah.
But with that, thank you for listening to the First Respodcast. Find us on social media, spelled how it sounds, and rate us 5 stars and leave us a comment. Love you guys. It is literally 1:39 where I am. So good night.
And any ghosts listening to this episode, sound off in the comments.
Boo. Whoa.